There's one thing the internet has taught us. People like weird shit.
All right, we're live.
Excellent. So, let's get the show notes up. There's one thing the internet has taught us. People like weird shit.
All right, we're live.
Excellent. Should we do a 3-2-0?
All right, I'll run the numbers if you're going to host.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to start with our 3-2-1-0 record. So,
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, record. Okay, let's do our 3-2-1-0.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, 0.
0.
Awesome.
Excellent. As Bill and Ted might say. All right then. So, welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 433. This is episode 433.5, recorded on Sunday, March 17th, 2024.
All steamed up, I'm Joe.
And back to romming, I'm Majid. So, just the two of us today. We've still got an action-packed show, though, honest. So, first up in the news. Mint Monthly News, February 2024. Linux market share passes 4% for the first time. SerpentOS makes progress. AMD is told hands off HDMI 2.1. Google blocks RCS on router devices. AMD GPU has limits. Proton Mail comes to all desktops, and NVIDIA bans translation layers. In security and privacy, Avast is fined bigly, that's a word, honestly, for selling browser data. And then in our wanderings, Joe plays lots and lots and lots of games, and I do some mirrors. In our inner section, we're going to discuss a couple of scams and trying to protect the people that we care about. And then finally, we'll have some feedback and a couple of suggestions. So, the news. Take it away, Joe.
This is from Mint Monthly News, from the Linux Mint blog, from Londoner. Clem reports that the developer of the HexChat IRC client has decided there will be no more releases. To add high DPI support, the app would need to be updated to GTK3, but this never happened. There are IRC clients written in GTK3 which are high DPI compatible, but replacing HexChat with one of them doesn't really solve the problem. What Linux Mint needs, first and foremost, is a place for people to ask questions to other users. So with that in mind, work has started on a new app called Jargonaut. Jargonaut will be a dedicated app. It will do just that and do it better. It is an X app, so it's designed to work on all Linux distributions and all desktop environments. Although it uses the IRC, it won't be developed as an IRC client. It will support pastebin, Imgur via D&D, uploading your system specifications, troubleshooting, and many features which have nothing to do with IRC. Yet you won't be able to join channels or perform common IRC commands. If you want to follow progress on this new app, visit github.com/linuxmint/jargonaut. Majid?
So, I can completely understand why they've decided there's no point having HexChat because IRC is so 2001 and people don't generally use it as much. I'm a little bit confused though as to
It's very 1998.
yeah, okay, fine, but I'm a bit confused what they're basically describing is something similar to a forum, with Jargonaut.
Yeah. It
But
sounds like that's where it's starting as a forum since you won't be able to do a lot of the IRC commands. So
mhm,
maybe it grows into something else from there.
which I mean, they're right in saying that what people really want is a place to ask questions and stuff like that. And, that's why you have, things like the Ubuntu forums on the net. And you have certain, when it comes to mobile, OnePlus were famous for having a community kind of page, forum, app type thing. Um, let's see how it works out. Let's see how it works out. Okay, exciting news. Linux Mint, Linux market share passes 4% for the first time. So this is from Ars Technica via Londoner, but it has been around on quite a few of the uh, tech press, and it's even talked about on Linux tech tips, Linus tech tips. Sorry, Linux reached 4.03% of global market share in February, according to data from research firm StatCounter. That takes Linux past the 3% milestone it reached in June 2023. While we're still far off from the year of the Linux desktop, interest in Linux has somewhat grown lately. StatCounter says it gets its desktop operating OS usage stats from tracking code installed on over 1.5 million global websites, generating over 5 billion monthly page views. The only adjustments the firm says it makes to this data are around moving bot activity and adjusting for Google Chrome pre-rendering. Note that when StatCounter analyzes desktop OSs, it also includes laptop computers, and StatCounter says it may revise its data within 45 days of publication. As spotted by Linuxiac, Linux's reported desktop share was higher than ever in February. If you count Chrome OS as a Linux OS, then market share totaled 6.34%. But if we focus on the numbers alone, we see that the nearly 33-year-old OS's market share growing 31.3% from June 2023, when we last reported on Linux market share, to February. Since June, Linux usage has mostly increased gradually. Overall, there's been a big leap in usage compared to 5 years ago. In February 2019, Linux was reportedly on 1.58% of desktops globally. Since June, Chrome OS adoption took a bit of a dive, representing 2.27% of the worldwide market share last month. In October, Google's Chromebook OS reached 4.01% market share, but has been declining mainly since. Windows dominance, meanwhile, mostly increased between June and February, when the Microsoft OS was reportedly on 72.17% of computers. From June 22 to 23, there seems to be a significant drop from 76% to 68%, but now Windows OS usage has seemingly returned to early 2022 levels. macOS, meanwhile, has seen a desktop market share drop from 21.3% in June to 15.4% in February. However, the Apple OS's current market share is similar to what we saw in January 2023 and February 2023, 15 and 16% respectively. StatCounter's newest numbers show an uptick in Linux usage over the past months. Ultimately, the big OSs are still by far Windows and Mac OS, which represented 87% of desktop OSs in February. In the US specifically, Linux's desktop market share missed the 4% line, hitting 3.85. That's still improvement from the US usage in June 2023, which is 1.96%. That's quite a bit, actually. Despite this growth, we of course remain far from any sort of year of the Linux desktop, where Linux is a desktop OS. There's plenty of debate over why. Linux founder Linus Torvald has suggested it's a lack of a standardized desktop that goes across all Linux distros that held it back. Still, it's interesting to watch usage of the open source OS grow, especially as fragmentation and the app discovery improve. It's a slow climb that will probably never result in Linux sitting at the top of the peak desktop OS mountain, but big gains, like in India, where Linux has reportedly been the second biggest OS, highlight the proclivity that certain technologists have towards Linux. So I have a couple of thoughts. So number one, I know people might say, 4%, it's not a lot. We're talking about all the computers that these guys have got access to, and so you would expect that to be a representative sample from the whole world. And if you've gone up from 3% and a bit to 4% in 6 months, I mean that's a 35% increase in a short period of time. The second thing is the fact that these numbers don't include Chrome OS, because initially when I saw the numbers, I thought, oh, they must be including Chrome, but they're not. And Chrome, even with the might of a big company behind it, hasn't really moved outside of the education sector massively. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't see a huge number of Chromebooks out in the wild, personally. Um, Kids seem to use it at school, and I think enterprises do, but I mean, that's that really.
Yeah,
When I was
but
watching, but when
also
I was what?
in regards to Chrome, last year at this time, I would have been hard pressed to consider it an actual proper Linux distro. Yes, it runs on the Linux kernel, but if you look at what they're doing now, they're basically making a Linux distro that you can run Chrome in.
Yeah, it's
So
basically Debian. It's basically Debian, isn't
yeah,
it? Yeah. No, but the most interesting thing I thought was, so in the article there's a discussion about India, and when I was watching the video on LTT, they went into a little bit more of the numbers, and apparently in India it's 15% market share. Yeah, and remember that's a country of 1.4 billion people. I'm not saying that every one of them's got a computer, but a large number of them probably do.
well, and
And so,
I also suspect in like India or places with large populations that don't necessarily have the liquid assets to be able to go out and grab a new computer simply because Windows 11 demands it, might make that shift to Linux a little bit easier.
oh yeah, definitely. And also when you take into account that there are so much of the IT sector is in India, isn't it? There's just by numbers, there's millions of software engineers over there. So you've got a more, in one sense, you've got a slightly techier populace amongst the people who would be using it. Obviously, there's lots of people who have issues with literacy and stuff like that, and for them, their phone is probably their main computer. But um, I mean, we've seen on our own kind of forums, the discords and whatever. There's quite a few Indian lads on there.
Right.
Yeah, and so
And from what I
I
can
think
tell, there's a pretty large like maker and repair community that will
mm,
take old stuff and make it work again.
mm,
So
because again, because of the costs involved. Now, there was a discussion about whether the Steam Deck is included in these figures because that's technically a Linux distro.
well, it's more than
It
technically a Linux distro. It's literally running Arch, and you can drop down to the desktop and have a full
true,
desktop.
true, but how many of those people do you think who bought it have bought it as a desktop?
Oh, none of them really, but it's still a
No,
distro.
no. So the question this was posed was is if the Steam Deck is included in the numbers, then is that inflating it? Or if the Steam Deck isn't included in the numbers, that means that actually the market share is even higher.
My assumption would be that I guess it depends on how they get their numbers. So if they're looking at people that visit their website, like a lot of other um, of these reporting companies do, then oof, the Steam Deck probably isn't all that counted because
Yeah.
I mean, who logs into a browser on their Steam Deck and goes to a website?
See,
Probably,
that's the point, isn't it?
yeah.
So I think actually, if you were to include the Steam Deck, I reckon this would be even higher. I'm not sure how much higher, maybe not significantly, I don't know, but I think that so actually this is all good news basically. I think yeah, 2025 year of the Linux desktop. That's not going to happen. But yes, it is good news to see things are going forward. Speaking of things going forward, Serpent OS makes progress on packaging the GNOME 45 desktop. So this is from Phronix. So IT Doherty, that maker of distros everywhere you go, um, his Linux distro Serpent OS Linux distribution continues to be being raised, and over the past month made progress on packaging up various GNOME 45 desktop components, working on stateless system support with System D and other features. IT published in his last month's status update on Serpent OS this evening to outline the February highlights. Some of the latest accomplishments for this original Linux distro include Serpent OS is preparing to roll out the newest version of its Boulder packaging build tool this weekend. The new builder has been given the Rust treatment and shares its codebase with Serpent's Moss tool. Trigger supports have been integrated into Moss. That is Moss as in the tool, not Moss of this parish. for actions taken at different stages of the package management operations. Continued work on stateless system support via continuous system integration and the like. Serpent OS has now packaged up most of the basic parts of GNOME 45. Other packaging updates include LVVM 17.4, Rust 1.78, GCC 13.2, GNU BinUtils 2.42, and glibc 2.39. On the short-term outlook, they're hoping to release pre-alpha images of Serpent OS for testing by the general public. Those wishing to learn more about the latest Serpent OS highlights can do so via the serpentos.com blog. Have you ever checked out Serpent OS?
I have not, but usually anything that Ike does is worthwhile to check out. So
Yeah, I mean, if you know what Ike should have on his tombstone, when in the future, obviously,
I
when he
did it
passes
all.
away. Yeah, no, no, no. It's like wandering Linux nomad of no fixed abode. Because guy can make some Linux distros, doesn't he? He makes really interesting ones. I just wish he'd stick with them and not like leave.
Well, that's
Solus as an example,
that's the
Clear
best way
OS
to
as an
get
example.
that's the best way to get a pay rise.
Yeah, well, fair point. Hey, yeah, don't hate the player, hate the game, I suppose. All right, then, take it away, Joe, for the next one.
Okay, HDMI forum to AMD. No, you can't make an open source HDMI 2.1 driver. This is from Ars Technica. Linux users can't hit the same resolutions and speeds as Windows or DisplayPort. Any Linux user trying to send the highest resolution images to a display at the fastest frame rate is out of luck for the foreseeable future, at least when it comes to an HDMI connection. The licensing group that controls the HDMI standard, the HDMI Forum, has reportedly told AMD that it does not allow an open source implementation of the HDMI 2.1 or HDMI 2.1 Plus specification. Blocking tools such as AMD's FreeSync from working over HDMI connections at resolutions/rate combinations like 4K at 120 Hz or 5K at 240 Hz. Linux blog Phoronix noted in January 2021 that the HDMI forum did not offer public access to the HDMI 2.1 specification. Alex Duscher, an AMD engineer who has long contributed to the company's open source offerings, has kept a related bug thread alive for at least 2 years, only to deliver the negative outcome yesterday. In February 2023, Duscher reported that he was working with our AMD legal team to sort out what we can deliver while still complying with our obligation to HDMI Forum. 2 months later, he said that AMD got the basic functionality up and running. Now we have to go through each of the features with legal and determine if how we can expose them while meeting our obligations. Summer and fall of 2023 went by with legal reviews still underway, and in October the decision was in the hands of the HDMI Forum. On Wednesday afternoon, Duscher offered the current resolution. The HDMI Forum has rejected our proposal. Unfortunately, at this time, an open source HDMI 2.1 implementation is not possible without running afoul of the HDMI Forum requirements. Ours has reached out to the HDMI Forum, AMD, and Duscher for further comment and will update the post with new information. X.org was also reportedly involved in negotiations with the HDMI Forum. Membership in the HDMI Forum is a minimum of $15,000, while AMD is a listed member that likely doesn't extend to offering up an implementation of a specification for public use. The member agreement forbidding such things does not appear to be publicly available, nor does an addendum for members linked from the forum's site. A source code license found on the forum site does not appear to be particularly flexible. Phoronix and some commenters have suggested potential interference from media firms concerned about digital video ripping. That would seem like a barn door closed years after the horse's departure, but it also exists as one explanation, lacking other detail. This outcome leaves DisplayPort as the likely best option for Linux users needing the best possible output. It also suggests that AMD has to decide whether to implement newer HDMI support inside closed source Linux drivers or simply point its most demanding customers to other options. Well, they'll probably do both. probably suggest DisplayPort while also making available HDMI closed source Linux drivers. Would be my guess. If you're talking, I can't hear you. Nothing. I see your lips moving. Yes, I can read lips, so I caught that one. And I will say that earlier your audio was a bit back and forth, like two mics were fighting. So you might want to also check your Audacity and make sure that it's still doing what it's supposed to. All right, while we give him a minute to get that all fixed. I don't find it excessively surprising, but it really is like closing the barn door years too late. I mean, there are so many different ways that people can get around the DRM there and get it recorded, even if it's just, you know, from output to output. Watch me get out my, you know, VHS and make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes down to it, I'm not happy about this. I'm not happy about it at all. But
No, I'm not happy about it either.
what can you do? No, but what can you do though, isn't it? At the end of the day, I suppose it's
Yeah, the only thing you can really do is either follow the rules or get sued, and you know you'd get sued.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw all of that with Yuzu last week as well, didn't we?
Yep.
When we what's going on with my audio? Sorry, I do apologize. 1 second.
Actually, your audio sounds a little bit better now than it did earlier.
Okay.
Less echoey.
Okay. No, the only reason I say that is because the Audacity.
If you were switching back and forth between microphones, even if it wasn't intentional, Audacity will stutter and the timing will be off.
Well, I mean, it's getting yeah, it seems to be working now, but it's just a bit quiet. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, don't you just love Linux, eh? Let me just put the volume up, see if that makes a difference. That made any difference?
You sound good.
Okay, well.
I'm just concerned. Anyway. Like I said, I'm concerned about your Audacity. Is it at 2138?
Okay, so my Audacity does, when I'm tapping it, it's coming up on my Audacity.
Okay.
So I'm assuming it's still correct. I'm just trying to check the audio source, but it won't let me do that in the middle of a recording.
Yeah. No, what you're concerned about is right this second is the time, since you've already verified that you have a waveform. So 2309.
Okay, so mine says 2215.
Yeah. Hold on. Maybe I'm just old and my eyes don't work. So 2225.
Yeah, just hit 2225.
Perfect. We're still synced.
Okay. So we're still synced. Okay, excellent. Apologies for that, dear listener. Obviously, the amount of negative energy that was coming out of both me and Joe about that Blast News article caused my Audacity. Yeah, anyway. Okay. More not so good news stroke shower of bastard news. Google is blocking RCS on rooted Android devices. This is from The Verge, and again, it's on quite a lot of other tech websites. Google is cracking down on rooted Android devices, blocking multiple people from using the RCS message feature in Google Messages. Users with rooted phones, a process that unlocks privileged access to the Android operating system, like jailbreaking iPhones, have made several reports on the Google Messages support page, Reddit, and XDA web forum over the last few months, finding that they are suddenly unable to send or receive RCS messages. One example from Reddit user Joe Fuff shows that RCS messages would simply vanish after hitting the send button. Several reports also mentioned that Google Messages gave no indication that RCS chat was not working and was still showing us connected and working Google Messages. In a statement sent to The Verge, where we asked if Google is blocking root devices from using RCS, Google Communications Manager Ivy Hunt said the company is ensuring that message issuing receiving devices are following the operating messages defined by the RCS standard. Okay. In a bid to prevent spam and abuse on Google Messages. In other words, yes, Google is blocking RCS on rooted devices. Google rotates through many solutions to ensure that Android users can communicate sufficiently, and devices that may not have access to one communication protocol will always have at least another one available, said Hunt. In this case, users that will not be able to use RCS still have access to SMS and MMS messaging. There is some merit to Google's concern. RCS messaging has faced challenges with tackling spam, forcing Google to disable its RCS ads feature back in India back in 2022. Some services like payment and banking apps, including Google Pay and Wallet, will stop working if they detect users have rooted their device as a security measure. But these will typically provide a warning message to explain the device is unsupported. For users who experienced RCS issues with Google Messages, no such warning is apparently provided. Again, I have some thoughts. So, on the positive side, there is merit, as it says in the article, that RCS messaging has faced challenges. There have been issues with spam, and one of the ways that you can deal with spam is to limit who goes on, etc., etc. Having said that, I don't think this has got anything to do with that personally. Secondly, I thought the whole reason that they wanted to go to the RCS standard and all that stuff, especially in the States, about getting Apple to open up its ecosystem and intercept, because was that RCS was an open standard, and while the reality is that there is an open RCS standard, but this is Google's RCS standard, which is slightly different, and so they have control. And so really, all of that bullshit about Apple's not being open, well, neither are you.
Yeah,
Um,
it's definitely getting more closed every day, is what it feels like. But I don't know. The messaging here kind of says, okay, this is our quick and dirty solution, and we might come up with something else in the future, which is a great way to one, kick the can down the road. So, and
I
another
mean,
maybe potentially to feed everybody a line like they are trying to
yeah,
be open when they're not.
no,
No,
yeah. I mean, Google are the masters at that, aren't they?
yeah, I can kind of understand the whole Google Pay wallet stopping with a rooted device, because I'm sure someone could find a way to modify it to do something entirely hinky. So when it comes to people's money like that, I definitely agree it's a good idea to have that little extra layer of security. But they could probably implement it in a different way other than blocking people that decide that they actually own their device.
But again, with that, they're at least making it clear.
Right.
If you've got a rooted device and you've got Lineage on or any other kind of ROM, and you try and download your bank, it'll say, look, this one would install because it's a rooted device. And it's like, and you can have the discussion about the merits of that, you know, on one way. Here, though, there is no indication to the people that their RCS messages aren't working.
Right.
There's no indication even that then an SMS has gone instead,
Well,
which is
does this say how long this has been going back? This has to be a recent thing.
it. It is relatively recent, last couple of months, but
Right, they could
the
have put
idea
out
that
something by now to some kind of pop up saying RCS messages won't work because you're rooted. They could
yeah,
have done that.
yeah, exactly, and so that would then make sense. And then coming across and saying it's about spam protection and stuff like that. Are you really telling me that people root their phones so they can send spam?
Right.
I would thought that they would just send spam because they can send spam. You wouldn't go through that much hassle anyway.
Yeah, you
But
could still send RCS messages and spam using some of the automation tools that are available in Android with a
exactly,
non-rooted device. So once again, the argument does kind of fall short there.
yeah. I mean, as I said, the actual concern that they have, fair enough. The thing that they're trying to say that look, this is a security thing. Okay, fine. Especially when it's to do with payment and banking stuff. Okay, that's fine. But don't bullshit. This is the thing, you see. That's what gets me about a lot of these things is if you're open and honest and upfront about it, most people would kind of go, okay, fine. But it's when they kind of couch it in this kind of media speak. Do you know what I mean? And gaslight you. Oh yeah, you can still use an SMS or MMS. And it's kind of like, yeah, okay, but didn't you spend a whole lot of time trying to tell us that's a bad thing to do? Anyway, it's just yeah, Google being Google, I suppose. Maybe why am I surprised?
Oh,
Why am I surprised?
and Bill on YouTube says, I've learned to think of iPhone and Android as just two brands of the same type of product. It doesn't do any good to look at Android device as an open alternative. So yeah, he agrees
I
with
mean,
us.
yeah, that is true. I mean, I think that's unfortunately the way we're going to have to look into it because, as you were saying about Google earlier, they always try and show that they're doing the open thing and then slowly close it down.
This is for your
Um,
own good.
yeah, yeah, and it's kind of like okay. I mean, on a more broader point, Android is still more open than iOS, and so it's not. I think it's something that I'll always stay on. And the fact that I can do things like routing and stuff like that, which I suppose I'll talk about in my wanderings later. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's just Google being Google, unfortunately. Anyway, I think I've waxed lyrical enough about that. Take it away, Joe, for the next one.
Okay, AMD GPU Linux driver no longer lets you have unlimited control to lower your power limit. And this is from Phoronix. The AMD GPU Linux driver, up until the recent Linux 6.7 kernel release, has let you lower the power limit of your graphics card with, well, no limits. This has allowed AMD Radeon Linux users to limit their GPU power draw when desiring for power efficiency reasons, but since Linux 6.7, they've begun enforcing a lower power limit set by the respective graphics card BIOS. Users petitioned to have this change reverted, but in the name of safety, this lower limit enforcement will stand. The AMD GPU driver has long honored the vBIOS programmed maximum power limit, but until Linux 6.7, the driver hasn't enforced the vBIOS set lower power limit. But since Linux 6.7 and the plan moving forward is to honor this power limit bounding box, matching the behavior of the AMD Radeon Windows driver. Since the Linux 6.7 kernel release, have been users have complained and reports of regression in the AMD GPU driver no longer honoring previously allowed lower power limits as they are falling outside the minimum limits established by the graphics card AIB partner. AMD and the Linux Direct Rendering Manager subsystem maintainers have decided this will be the intended behavior to avoid risking any user hardware issues and potential damage. Granted, the likelihood for damage is more often on the upper power limit, but still, limiting the GPU power use too low can lead to undefined behavior or other hard to diagnose problems. It was confirmed today in this bug report that this has been discussed on the AMD GFX ML, and the conclusion was that underpowering outside of the bounding box is potentially dangerous and might damage the hardware. This won't be added back in. That stems from a lengthy mailing list discussion and confirmation from AMD that this matches the Windows driver behavior and that there is the risk when running outside of validated power ranges to see undefined behavior and potentially hardware damage. This change is frustrating some AMD Linux users, with some graphics cards reportedly having very conservative predefined lower power limits and thus no longer being able to run on the lower end outside of that imposed range, even though they could successfully do so on prior kernels. Now, this is an odd one, and I'm kind of two minds about it. I mean, if AMD is getting a lot of service calls, or they're spending a lot of time answering questions about why people's graphics cards aren't working and troubleshooting and et cetera, and it turns out it's because they have their power limit set too low, and because that's not the first thing you ask as a tech to see what's wrong. I could see them wanting to limit that by limiting how low you could go, and I doubt that there is going to be any actual hardware damage from not putting enough power through the graphics card, but I guess it's possible. But yeah, and if people want to wreck their graphics cards, then they should have that option.
It's the thing about, I own my stuff, and if I want to mess it up, I will.
Yeah, yeah. Tell them the risk, then that's their thing. But it's like I said, I can see from like a service tech point of view from their side, it's probably saving them money in the long run, not having to troubleshoot those lower power limits that people put in. But then again, I can see the frustration from the Linux side because, battery life on Linux just isn't optimized. And this is one more tool that's taken out of our toolbox to make our batteries last longer. Now, Bill says, when I first got that Fire Pro card that you're using now, Joe, I had it only plugged into the PCI slot without the 4-pin separate power plug, and it worked. I'm not sure at what point I would have reached the limitation of what that card would do, given how little power it was actually getting. It sounds like you wouldn't be able to do that now. I'm not sure if that would be the same thing. I do have it hooked up to the 6-pin, but or the 4-pin. But yeah, it's hooked up. It's nice to know that it can run without it, but I'm not sure if that's how that lower limit works, because I think you can set the voltage manually on some BIOSes. Anything else on there, Majid?
No, not really. To be honest, I think you've kind of mentioned what I thought as well, to be fair. All right, then. So we'll move on. So Proton Mail is coming to all major desktop platforms. So this is on Tech Radar. Again, it's on quite a few other websites. Proton Mail is broadening its support for more platforms by making desktop apps available for all major systems. The secure email provider, popular with those who send sensitive communications, probably with people who give a crap about their security and privacy, but okay, now has an app for Windows and Mac computers, as well as a Linux version in beta. These are available to paying users of Proton Mail. The desktop app is available. A desktop app is also available for Proton Calendar, again for paying customers. There's a few 14-day free trial for non-paying users to experience these new desktop apps too. Swissfirm knows that Proton Mail is now available on every major desktop and mobile platform. They also follow in the wake of the desktop app launches for its other products, the cloud storage service Proton Drive and password manager Proton Pass. Although I'm still not sure whether there is a Linux client for Proton Drive. Might have to do a man searches stuff on the internet thing for that. Anyway, Proton Mail is the world's largest encrypted mail service, and the company claims that the new desktop apps offer the same robust end-to-end encryption, but in a more convenient form. Proton believes that other email providers do not take user privacy as seriously. Oh, they do take it very seriously. They just want to be able to go on and make sure you have no privacy. Anyway, sorry, my tinfoil hat is out. It claims that users of Microsoft Outlook, for instance, potentially share their data with Microsoft's 801 external partners. Those who access their emails via Chrome, or another browser, I suppose, also give advertisers a chance to see their browsing history, according to Proton. Proton believes that bringing its services to desktop highlights its commitment to making privacy and security as accessible as possible. It adds it's an important part of offering people the choice of how to protect their data while enabling them to be as productive as possible. The company also notes that big email providers such as Gmail and Yahoo do not offer desktop solutions. Proton claims, however, they are often requested from users, especially business customers. Okay, so I would have thought having a proper Proton Drive client on all the platforms was a more of a priority than Proton Mail, but I'm assuming they can make some money out of it, and it does seem that paid customers are the ones that can have this. So I'm assuming that's why they've put their resources into this. As much as I like a native email client, Thunderbird, Evolution, whatever, I do recognize that I'm probably one of a small weird minority who does that, and vast majority of people use cloud, their browser for Gmail, Yahoo, etc. And interestingly, if you look at the new Microsoft Outlook app that's being made for Windows 11, it is basically a web app. So if you bought Outlook, obviously you've got Outlook 365, which is a native application. If you've got Windows 10 or Windows 11, it comes with the Mail app, and the Mail app is again a native client. When you go on that, it gives you the option. Do you want to try out the new Outlook? And you can say yes, and then you go on the new Outlook, and it seems okay. It seems slightly less powerful than uh, the um, the the other apps. And then that's when I realized, when I was reading another article somewhere else, that it is just the web app as a progressive web app. And so even if Microsoft are doing this, how much of a need is there for this? I mean, I'm happy it exists, and I'll probably download it and try it out if I had a paid subscription, but not entirely sure what they're thinking they're going to gain from doing it. I don't know. Have I missed something there, Joe?
No, I think you hit it all there, but getting on the desktop for them probably will just make people more comfortable. And starting with, Proton Mail, that's their workhorse. That's what most people use. So get them used to the idea and then start adding other things.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose so. Yeah, I
But
suppose so.
still, web apps kind of feel, like they're cheaping out a bit. But it
I
is
mean,
also the easiest way to get things done.
yeah, it is. It is, and that's fine. I mean, there's plenty of good web apps out there, and integrations with. I mean, I can't remember if it was on this program or OTC. I talked about how so many of the browsers, you can have web apps that look almost like they are native apps on a lot of distros. Mint has a web apps thing, Manjaro does, for example. So I've got nothing against the concept as such. It's just, if that's the way everybody's going, why are you going the other direction? That's my only question. And as I said, I would have preferred a Proton Drive Linux client than a Proton Mail Linux client. But hey, that's me.
Got to start somewhere.
Okay. Yeah, very true, very true. All right, next up for you, Joe.
NVIDIA bans using translation layers for CUDA. This is from Tom's Hardware. NVIDIA has banned running CUDA-based software on other hardware platforms using translation layers in its licensing terms listed online since 2021. But the warning previously wasn't included in the documentation placed on a host system during the installation process. This language has been added to the EULA that's included when installing CUDA 11.6 and newer versions. The restriction appears to be designed to prevent initiatives like ZLUDA, which both Intel and AMD have recently participated, and perhaps more critically, some Chinese GPU makers from utilizing CUDA code with translation layers. We've pinged NVIDIA for comment and will update you with additional details or clarifications when we get a response. Longhorn, a software engineer, noticed the terms. You may not reverse engineer, decompile, or disassemble any portion of the output generated using SDK elements for the purpose of translating such output artifacts to target a non-NVIDIA platform. A clause in the installed EULA text file reads. The clause was absent in the EULA documentation that's installed with the CUDA 11.4 and 11.5 release, and presumably with all versions before that. However, it is present in the installed documentation with version 11.6 and newer. Being a leader has a good side and a bad side. On the one hand, everyone depends on you. On the other hand, everyone wants to stand on your shoulders. The latter is apparently what has happened with CUDA, because the combination of CUDA and NVIDIA hardware has proven to be incredibly efficient. Tons of programs rely on it. However, as more competitive hardware enters the market, more users are inclined to run their CUDA programs on competing platforms. There are two ways to do it: recompile the code, available to developers of the respective programs, or use a translation layer. For obvious reasons, using a translation layer like ZLUDA is the easiest way to run a CUDA program on non-NVIDIA hardware. All one has to do is take already compiled binaries and run them using ZLUDA or other translation layers. ZLUDA appears to be floundering now, with both AMD and Intel having passed on the opportunity to develop it further. But that doesn't mean translation isn't viable. Several Chinese GPU makers, including one founded by the Chinese government, claim to run CUDA code. Danglin Technology designs processors featuring a computing architecture compatible with programming models like CUDA/OpenCL. Given that reverse engineering of NVIDIA GPU is hard, unless one already somehow has the low-level details about NVIDIA GPU architectures, we are probably dealing with some sort of translation layer here too. One of the largest Chinese GPU makers, More Threads, also has a Musify translation tool designed to allow CUDA code to work with its GPUs. However, whether or not Musify falls under the classification of a complete translation layer remains to be seen. Some of the aspects of Musify could involve porting code. As such, it isn't entirely clear if the NVIDIA ban on translation layers is a direct response to these initiatives or a preemptive strike against future developments. For obvious reasons, using translation layers threatens NVIDIA's hegemony in the accelerated computing space, particularly with AI applications. This is probably the impetus behind NVIDIA's decision to ban running their CUDA applications on other hardware platforms using translation layers. Recompiling existing CUDA programs remains perfectly legal. To simplify this, both AMD and Intel have tools to port CUDA programs to their ROCm and OpenAPI platforms, respectively. As AMD, Intel, TensTorrent, and other companies develop better hardware, more software developers will be inclined to design for these platforms, and NVIDIA's CUDA dominance could ease over time. Furthermore, programs specifically developed and compiled for particular processors will inevitably work better than software run via translation layers, which means better competitive positioning for AMD, Intel, TensTorrent, and others against NVIDIA if they can get software developers on board. GPU remains an important and highly competitive arena and will be keeping an eye on how the situation progresses in the future. Wow, that was a mouthful.
That was well done. I'm not sure if I know enough to have an opinion on this, to be honest.
Well, Bill says from NVIDIA's
I mean, not
point
that
of
that normally
view-
stops me, but
Right,
I
right.
mean,
From NVIDIA's point of view, they probably just don't want to be associated with inevitable crapware that would flow from projects using the APIs. Yeah, potentially. And I'm not sure what to think about this either. I would need to dig a whole lot more into it before I understood it enough. Because, like, half of that was very... What?
yeah. I mean, who is this Bill guy anyway that keeps coming up on our YouTube chat?
I
Maybe
know,
we should
right?
have him on a
Right, maybe
we
you should join the show.
Yeah, exactly. And then maybe then we might actually like give a crap about what he says.
Right?
Actually, we're not going to do that, are we? Let's be honest. Okay. Oh well, that's it for the news. On to security and privacy.
Okay. Avast fined $16.5 million for privacy software that actually sold users browsing data. Oh, good. I'm glad they got sued for that.
All right, face palm.
Avast, the cybersecurity software company, is facing a $16.5 million fine after it was caught storing and selling customer information without their consent. The FTC, Federal Trade Commission, announced the fine on Thursday and said that it's banning Avast from selling user data for advertising purposes. From at least 2014 to 2020, Avast harvested user web browsing information through its antivirus software and browser extension, according to the FTC's complaint. This allowed it to collect data on religious beliefs, health concerns, political views, locations, and financial status. The company then stored this information indefinitely and sold it to over 100 third parties without the knowledge of customers, the complaint says. A joint investigation from Motherboard and PC Mag first brought attention to Avast's data privacy practices in 2020. Avast shut down its data harvesting arm called JumpShot shortly after the reports emerged. Although Avast said it removed identifying information before selling user data, the FTC found it failed to sufficiently anonymize customers' browsing information. Instead, it sold data with unique identifiers for each browser, revealing websites visited, timestamps, the type of device and browser used, and location. The FTC also claims Avast deceived users by saying its software would help eliminate tracking on the web when it actually did the tracking itself. In addition to the $16.5 million fine, the FTC's proposed order prevents Avast from misrepresenting what it does with the data it collects. It must stop selling or licensing any browsing data from Avast products to advertisers, as well as delete all of the web browsing data obtained by JumpShot. Avast is also required to notify affected customers that their data has been sold without their knowledge. We are committed to our mission of protecting and empowering people's digital lives, Avast spokesperson Jess Money said in a statement to The Verge. While we disagree with the FTC's allegations and characterizations of the facts, we are pleased to resolve this matter and look forward to continuing to serve our millions of customers around the world. The FTC has been cracking down on poor data privacy practices in recent weeks. In January, the FTC reached a settlement with OutLogic, formerly Xmode Social, that prevents the data broker from selling information that can be used to track users' locations. It banned in-market from selling precise user locations as well. Now, this doesn't surprise me that Avast did this, and it sounds like they got caught. But, all they had to do was add a little line in their EULA saying, yes, we will sell your data, and then it would all been perfectly legal because, nobody reads the EULA.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very bad look, isn't it? It's a very, very bad look. I can just imagine that what probably happened was that they were just too tempted by the amount of money they'd get for that data.
Yeah. Well, if I remember right from like way back when, Avast used to be free, and then you could opt into like paying for things for it. So, like I said, I'm not surprised that they were selling users' data, but yeah, you cannot market yourself as providing privacy when you're then selling the information that you were supposed to be keeping private.
Yeah. No, definitely. I agree. Yeah, it's a very bad look. I used to use Avast, I must say.
Yeah,
because it was free, and I still haven't got the guts. I know people say that Windows Defender is good enough, but I don't have the guts to use Windows without an antivirus of some description, even if it's a light one or free one or whatever.
Well, there was a time when Windows Defender wasn't very good. It has improved from my understanding. And then there was a time before Windows Defender. And then there was a time when you could install Windows Defender, but it wasn't included automatically.
So I think, don't use Avast, guys. Well, that's it for security and privacy. Onto the Wanderings. Take it away, Joe.
All right. I was able to get a couple of good deals on some electronics, and I was able to pick up a Nintendo Switch OLED for my wife, and she has been enjoying it, and I'm working on 3D printing a few things for it because it's fun.
Now, how much did you get it for?
Oh, the OLED version with the dock and I think it was a couple of games and a controller and all the adapters and everything. It came out to about, $220?
That's not bad at all. Yeah. Not bad at all.
Okay. Now, I have 3D printed a holder for the docking station so that it can be mounted directly to the wall. And I had given her my Stadia Founders Edition controller with the updated firmware, thinking that the Switch could do Bluetooth controllers, but it can't. It has to be, the dedicated Nintendo Switch controller, unless you want to go in and modify the Switch itself to be able to take other controllers. And I do not have permission to do that because it's not my Switch. Now, I was also able to get myself a Steam Deck, one of the non-OLED ones, for 512 gigabyte for also a pretty darn good price. I paid $340 for it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are these coming off the back of a lorry?
No, this the Switch may have come from off the back of a lorry. I'm not sure. The guy that sold it to us said he was selling it because his wife was pregnant and he was just trying to get rid of some things and have a little bit more money to get things set up for them. So that was great. But the Steam Deck I actually picked up from GameStop. So because we swung by GameStop after picking up the Switch in order to get Jackie a couple of games that she could play. And they had a good deal there for it and offered me some extra off because of how much we were spending, so it worked out really well.
Okay.
Now, that being said, I almost returned the device after the first couple of days, but I've decided to keep it at this point. My main problem with it is I'm not the biggest fan of using a controller for precision in gaming. I prefer keyboard and mouse. Most specifically in this case, Borderlands 2. I was able to get the game to run in handheld mode, but I'm really not a fan of aiming with it. I also had it hooked up to a TV and a mouse and keyboard. I was pleasantly surprised with the load times, which are significantly faster than my gaming laptop. But I had issues with the scroll wheel speed, and I didn't have any way in game to adjust it. I assume that I can do that in the Steam settings, and I'll get back to that eventually and give it another try. I want to do a side-by-side comparison with the Steam Deck versus my older gaming laptop and just see how it works connected to my living room TV.
Quick
Now,
question about that.
mhm.
When it does do video output, because I know the Steam Deck screen is a 720p screen. When it does video output, does it go all the way up to 4K and all that?
I don't know. I don't have a 4K TV.
Oh, okay, fine.
I
Fair enough.
don't expect that it would go all the way up to 4K, but I don't see why it wouldn't do 1080.
Mhm.
Now, I also had to jump through a lot of hoops to get GTA Vice City to work correctly, and after I did, I was still less than impressed with the controls. I'm gonna give it another try since I'm still getting used to the using a controller, and I haven't tried it with a mouse and keyboard yet, and I'm sure that'll be great. But it does run. But yeah, we'll see. Now, I also installed RetroArch from the Steam store, which is absolutely free. And I already have like the Sega Classics that I purchased through Steam. So and that has like I think 30 games on it or something crazy like that. And I ended up using that to play Comic Zone and Golden Axe, which I greatly enjoyed. But I also wanted to play some other games that weren't included in their collection, like Shadowrun, and maybe absolutely finish the game again, since I've done a lot of partial playthroughs in the last couple of years, but I've only ever finished the game once, and that was like 25 years ago. So RetroArch installed and dropped down to the desktop to move some files around from some of the other machines, and then off to the Matrix I went. Oh, by the way, I run Arch. Had to say it.
Yeah,
Um,
well, had to be another one of us, innit?
yeah, I had to, jump on that bandwagon sooner or later. I
Yeah, yeah,
will.
yeah. Apparently, Bill uses Arch. Did you know that?
He might have mentioned it once or twice. That's the thing about
Oh,
those
really?
Arch users, man. They never shut up about it.
No, well, I mean, I find that you can never find out about it. They're very hidden about it, and they never say
Mm,
anything about it at all.
never. Oh, is that what you found?
Yes, that's what I found, and with a healthy dose of sarcasm.
Mm.
Anyway.
Now, I will say that with Shadowrun, save states make it a whole lot easier, and I use them a lot to help out with like the various matrix runs and random encounters. I did have to remap those keys in RetroArch on the Steam side to get everything working well and have quick access to save and restore. Now, I had originally attempted to play the game directly from an emulator in the desktop mode. This did not work for me. Some of the keys on the controllers could not be remapped. There may have been a way to get around that, but some of the controller keys were mapped to things like escape and would not work as A, B, or C. Um, Now, while in desktop mode, I run Arch. I also installed Chrome and
You
VLC.
hadn't mentioned that. You hadn't mentioned that at all.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure, since you said you had trouble hearing when people said that they were running Arch, that you knew that I run Arch.
Oh yeah, thanks for that,
Oh,
Joe. That's tattooed on my soul now.
good, good. Now, I did install Chrome and VLC and SSHFS, and there's a couple of other things that I'll probably install later. I did eventually have to set up with System D to have the SSH server actually be on all the time. Now, a couple of things that I do want to mention here. The Discover Store makes Arch pretty easy. I run Arch. I did not need to drop to the command line to install anything, and I'm able to access some of the applications that I
It's a
installed.
lot of coughing you're doing there. Maybe you should see a doctor
I got
about
a
that.
tickle. I got a drink right here. I'll take some. At the end of my spiel here. Um, now, you can anything that you some of the things that you actually I think anything that you install on the desktop mode you can then access through the Steam mode, like Chrome, and also I had an app image that that I am now able to access from my big picture Steam mode, which allows me to use the Steam Deck to access my Plex very easily. So I can use this handheld as a portable media device as well, which is nice since the screen is larger than my phones, and Jackie sometimes likes to play her Switch games later in the day in our room on the big TV in there. And so I can watch a TV show or something on my Steam Deck. Although lately, she'll be playing Batman and I'll be, playing Skyrim. Now, there are also some games that will not play with the standard Proton, such as like Batman Arkham Asylum. My wife has been playing this game on her Switch, and I wanted to be able to share that experience with her. But the game does not get past the load screen using the current version of Proton available from Steam. Now, I was able to look up and find that installing Proton GT fixes this issue, and the game seems to run pretty well. I, however, just kind of suck at the game. I'm not that good at it, and I'll be trying to get better at it, especially, using a controller setup now. I already mentioned that one, so I also had some fun with my 1GX in this last 2-week time frame. The computer that had the issues with the 512 gigabyte micro SD card. I was able to get a 2242 NGFF 512 gigabyte M.2 for about the same price that I would have paid for a 512 gigabyte micro SD card to act as a backup for my Nextcloud. And yeah, I did have to take the bottom apart to get it put in there, but honestly, it is so much faster and smoother than a micro SD card. And I don't think that it should not have as many problems as a micro SD card would with eventual failure. Now, I'm thinking about going back and reformatting that 2242 into 2 partitions and dual booting the device and like only using half of the drive from my Nextcloud, because my Nextcloud I think is currently taking up about 100 gig, and half the drive for Batacera or Tails or maybe a version of Arch, and see how that goes. Just for the simple fun of it. Now, on my Dell Venue 11 Pro, I had an issue where it came unplugged, like the charger came unplugged, and it drained all the way down. When I charged it up, the BIOS had reset, and I was not able to get the thing to boot. I did the normal updates to the BIOS, and taking off secure boot, all that jazz, and it should have worked, but it didn't. It turns out that I had done something odd when I first installed it, and my boot sector was on my SD card, even though my OS was on the SSD. Now, I could have worked with that, but I had kind of gotten tired of Ubuntu Cinnamon anyway, so I just decided to pull out the micro SD card and reformat with just the internal. And it worked out. So I got rid of Ubuntu Cinnamon, I installed Mint, and I started resetting up my applications. I think there's a bit more for me to do there. I do have to decide if I'm going to put a larger micro SD back in, maybe have that as a second Nextcloud backup, and just see when it dies. I'm still thinking of potentially getting rid of the device since I have others, but I've got a use case for it as well. It may not have like the processing power of the 1GX, but what it does have is like a significantly larger keyboard, a larger screen, and a battery in the keyboard. And now I used to have multiple keyboards for it that I could swap out when the battery got low, but I'm down to my last working one, but I could always get another one. and it really does make the longevity of that really good. It's still, not great because it's a Linux device that runs on a battery, but yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite devices. But I do need to start, like getting rid of some of the laptops I've repaired and things like that. So
That that Dell Venue, that must be about 10 years old.
it is pretty old. It is pretty old, but it still works like really good. I have zero complaints with it. Now, I'm not using it to like, render video or anything like that. I'm mostly just using it for light web browsing. It'll do YouTube easy enough. I may have done Audacity on it a couple of times, and
Um, what did you think of Ubuntu Cinnamon?
it was it was good. I don't have any complaints about Ubuntu Cinnamon directly. I think some of it is just Ubuntu and how they sometimes do updates. And other than that, it ran well. It looked pretty.
I just kind of think that I don't really see the point of Ubuntu Cinnamon. I know we've discussed this before. I don't kind of see the point. I mean, it's nice, it's there, but if you want the cinnamon experience, you might as well go Mint, really. But anyway, that's just. So
Well,
I was interested. I was
we've had the
interested for the fact that
developer
you actually.
for that created Ubuntu Cinnamon on the show
Mm,
before,
yeah,
and
and I understand. I understand.
no, some of it is, it's kind of there for people that want the Ubuntu experience and not the Linux Mint experience, but still want Cinnamon.
Hmm.
A very niche within a niche group.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not entirely sure how many people that is for, but hey, choice is good. Choice is
Yeah.
good.
And also, one thing I didn't mention there, I've been working on trying to get Xbox emulation working
Okay,
on
original
the
Xbox.
original Xbox working on
Hmm.
the Steam Deck, and that's been interesting. I'm reading through different forums on other people that have gotten it to work because I really want to play Crimson Skies. And while I can get it to load up, there's some visual issues, like not like the HUD's not coming up. So I don't know
Hmm.
what's going on most of the time. I am able to fly around, etc., etc. But I also installed Zimu a little differently than some of the people did. I'm using the app image as opposed to the Flatpak, so I might switch to the Flatpak and then apply the fixes that they're talking about. And yes, I do still own my original Xbox, and yes, I do own a copy of Crimson Sky, Crimson Sky's High Road to Redemption.
Hmm. I was going to mention something. Oh, did you mention something about you might use this as a server or something?
What, the Dell Venue?
Yeah.
Not really. I might
Oh,
use
okay,
it with
fine.
Nextcloud, like
Oh,
as
that's
a
what it was.
backup for my
No,
Nextcloud.
okay. No, the only reason I mentioned that is because I was watching a video today on using your old laptop as a server and
Mm.
how to kind of just set it up, and then it's always got you have it plugged in, and it still has some redundancy. It was with Docker containers and stuff. Tech Hut, the channel on YouTube. So I found it interesting actually because I thought that might be. I mean, to be honest, I don't
Yeah,
need a server, but if I was going to dabble into it, that'd be something I might do
I've seen
with old
some
hardware.
really interesting articles lately on reusing old hardware. Things like the Windows RT tablet,
Mm-hmm.
and getting like Raspbian or Raspberry Pi OS running on it,
Yeah,
and
because it's an ARM based, isn't it? Yeah.
right, and you can't really like get hardware acceleration for the graphics or anything, but you could easily run like Pi-hole on there or something. And
Mm.
that just seems like a really good idea. One, considering how cheap you can get those RT devices now, and two, it's not going to a landfill if you're using it for something like that. So
Mm.
I'm always down for reusing and repurposing. Like I'm trying to figure out a use now because when I hooked up Jackie's Nintendo Switch upstairs, I disconnected the gigabit bricks that occasionally, very occasionally, got used because it was hooked to the TV there. So I pulled that and hooked the switch up to that power supply. So I have this old, like, Nook style computer that I need to find a purpose for or get rid of. So
So it sounds like another project, really, doesn't it?
once I figure out a project for it.
Yeah. Okay, then. I suppose it's time for my bi-weekly wanderings. So it was a slightly quieter day at work, a quieter week at work than the last couple, which has been good because it's given me a bit of time to rest. I mean, when I was a junior, I used to be really annoyed by these attendings that would just kind of swan in, do one day, and then spend 2 days in meetings and doing courses and teaching and stuff like that. I have now turned into that guy. You know, it's like some. I have been in the hospital doing clinical work only for 3 days in the last 2 weeks. The rest of the time, I've been at this meeting, that meeting, teaching on this course, teaching on that course, or whatever. Um, it's a good change of pace for me. But yeah, it's just I just find it ironic. That's all. Anyway, uh, from Linux perspective, I'm still using Mint 21.3 on my ZenBook. So as I mentioned probably a couple of weeks ago, I did have Manjaro on that, and so yes, I used Arch as well. And then I
I'm sorry,
decided that
what?
I'd go.
I couldn't hear that.
Oh yeah, that I used Arch as well, but I
What's it called
used it.
again?
Arch. Actually, it's called Manjaro.
Arc. Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, that's
okay.
the one. That's the one. That's the one. Exactly. That's the one.
I
Exactly.
got
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Anyway, and I'd moved that over to Mint 21.3 Edge, since that has a newer kernel, and it's working well for what I need. I was missing a kind of GNOME search or KRunner type, universal search. So I was on Linux OTC with Leo and Bill. I don't know if you've heard of Bill. He runs Arch too as well, apparently. He's quite active today in the YouTube thing. I don't know. Maybe we should get him on the show. Anyway, they recommended Albert, which is like a Spotlight or a universal search. It's a little bit buggy when you set it up, but it does work quite well. Now, this box is a decently powered box, 16 gigs of RAM, 11th gen i5, and unsurprisingly, Mint is really performant on it. Now, I know that Cinnamon is lighter than GNOME, and maybe not so much KDE, but definitely lighter than GNOME. But because of the fact that there was so much headroom and so much power in this laptop, I thought if there are any kind of performance gains or UI elements, I probably wouldn't notice the difference. But I can actually, I genuinely can, and it surprised me how how well it's working. I mean, I'll get to a bit later, but I was ROMing an old Pixel 3a, and yeah, I mean, just all the stuff that I had to do with the files and all that, it was almost instantaneous, really quick. Anyway, speaking of KDE, which I kind of mentioned, I've installed KDE Neon, and that's on this podcasting box now, which I'm podcasting from. So, this used to have Ferron OS on, which is Mint with KDE. It's not exactly that, but it's kind of like that. I saw a lot of videos and a lot of stuff about KDE Plasma 6, and I thought, well, let me try that out. How am I going to try it out? Now, I normally use something like Kubuntu, but Kubuntu is not going to get Plasma 6, not even in the LTS in next month. It's more likely to be later on in the year as a PPA backport type thing. And at that point, it wasn't even in the AUR yet, although it is now apparently. So I thought, so the only way I could get it basically was to get KDE Neon. And as I say, the way that I conceptually think about KDE Neon is that the base is Ubuntu and on the LTS, but the desktop is basically a rolling release. And every time there's a change, an improvement, point change, whatever, it goes out to that. Had a few issues though getting it. Even booting into a live session. Ventoy didn't work, which was really annoying because I love Ventoy. I tried using Etcher, Rufus. Sometimes it would load up to Grub, but then it wouldn't go any further. Tried flashing it as an ISO, flashing it as a DD. In the end, I re-downloaded the ISO, which in the couple of days while I'd been doing this had been updated, and then it worked. So I can only assume it was something in the ISO. But because maybe whatever bug fix or whatever was done in the next snapshot that was sent out, it was sorted. I do like KD6. It's got its own character. It's obviously immensely configurable. It's got reasonable defaults. It looks nice. I like the changes that they've made. So, like for example, the expose view, which is very similar to the GNOME activities view, the kind of floating taskbar at the bottom. It looks nice. It works nice. It's finally does double click to open rather than single click, which is the way it should always have been. And I'm not the first person to have mentioned that. I was a bit surprised as to. I was a bit surprised that it wasn't as fully featured, as in KD Neon as a distro wasn't as fully featured. I had to download quite a lot of stuff. I mean, like I had to download LibreOffice, Discord, Audacity, things like that. Some of which I would have had to anyway, and some of which I would have expected to have, uh,
Been included
on,
in
yeah,
the
been
original
included in the
image.
ISO. Yeah. Which I mean, it's no big deal. It's not that difficult to download. But I must say, Discover is not the best app store. I mean, you'd think that if you've got a distro where you want to showcase the best of Qt and KDE technologies, you might want to spend a little bit more time on the App Store. I mean, it crashed regularly, and in the end, I just had to go quite a few times to the command line to
Really?
get stuff.
I haven't had a
Yeah,
problem with it so far.
maybe it's as I said, this is the bleeding edge. Maybe that's what it is, or maybe it's just my hardware. I don't know, but it just seemed to fall over quite a bit. I might actually install GNOME software just because it's just. I mean, I know it's not going to look very nice, but at least it might work a little bit better. Since I was getting bored, as I do, I thought I'd try and upgrade my Ubuntu work laptop to 24.04 because there's alpha images and pre-release betas available now. We're getting about
On
a
your
month away.
production work machine,
Yeah,
you were going to go beta.
yeah,
Does
I
that make
know,
sense to
and
you?
it doesn't make sense to me. But I was getting bored, and then in the end, I couldn't get it to work anyway. So I probably just I took that as a sign of you were already risking something. Don't take it any further. Um, but yeah. Speaking of Linux OTC, it was a good show with Bill and Leo. Always check it
Wait,
out. I always
who
think
are
you're
those
gonna get some
guys?
good. Oh, I don't know if you've heard of them. Bill and Leo. They're not really that into Linux. I had to kind of
Oh,
drag them
okay.
onto this.
What, Leo Laporte? I mean, I've heard of him.
I think his surname's Da Vinci. Oh, I don't know. I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
The Ninja
Anyway.
Turtle, right?
Yes, that's the
Okay.
one. That's the one. The one, yeah, the one. The one who eats pizza and has pineapple on his pizza. That one, yeah.
Hey, pineapple on pizza is delicious.
Yeah, I like pineapple on pizza. I also realize that I'm in a minority of people. Anyway, yeah, it's always good on that show. Actually, we always go on thinking we don't know what the hell to talk about, and then an hour and a half later, we're like, wow, we can talk. I mean, I knew I can talk for England, but I mean, so can those other guys. Anyway, so yeah, have a look, have a good. If you're interested, have a look at it. I know I've discussed it previously. Well, it's been discussed previously on here, but I finally got to use Scrippy. I mean, it's basically screen copy, but there's a distinct lack of vowels in the names.
SCRCPY.
Yeah,
A
exactly.
guy names all his applications like that.
Yeah. Has he not heard of vowels? Anyway, I must say it is actually a really brilliant piece of software. I mean, the fact that he's managed to do this when a lot of the big companies like Samsung, Oppo, Realme, a lot of the other Android vendors have, had to make their first party solutions of this kind of screen mirroring and all this kind of stuff, which would then work on some things and not work on other things. And, to have this kind of thing, which works on Linux, Mac, Windows, and, it does look quite cool. I mean, I was even actually tempted to take a video of it because it just, when you're there
it
on.
works really well and it's great. But the reason it doesn't, have wide acceptance with with vendors like Samsung and Oppo is because you have to, actually do a little bit of command line and set up your ADB. Now, did you use the wireless screen copy or the wired screen copy?
So I used the wired, and all I had to do really was just enable USB debugging, one or two commands, and then that was it. I was done. I already had ADB and
Right.
fastboot on that machine because because I'd used it for roaming, putting lineage, which I'll get to in a minute.
Well, you should
And so I didn't
definitely
have.
try out the wireless.
Yes, yeah. So that's the next thing I'm going to do. The next thing I'm going to do is to do the wireless. And the thing is, my laptop's a touchscreen laptop as well. So when it does mirror, I can then interact with my phone through my laptop. Oh man, it was so cool. I mean, I do need to find a use for it. I've got to be honest, and I'm sure I will, because it's just too cool to not use.
Oh, it's great
Uh,
when you're working, from your laptop and you have your phone set up with screen copy on your laptop, and then you get a phone call or something, and you don't have to pick up your phone. You don't have to take your hand off your mouse. You can just reach over and click answer, and there you go.
yeah. So I am going to I'm going to figure out how to do it wirelessly, and I'm going to try and integrate it into my workflow for work. I'm not entirely sure how, but I'm sure I will find a way. I'm really enjoying using my S24 Ultra, and actually, it does actually slightly pain me to say this, but I think it's close to being the best phone I've owned, and I've owned a lot of phones. And the reason I say it pains me is because I don't want to come across as some kind of Samsung Knight or Sam Apple shield. I've used plenty of different manufacturer devices, OnePluses and Google Pixels and Redmi's, Realme's, Xiaomi's, LG's back in the day, Sony's, whatever. And but as a package, it does seem to be the best. I mean, I has its issues. I mean, I don't like the relatively slow charging, unless you buy the specific charger in the box. I must say the thing about it is it's only because I got used to the really fast charging. Because I got used to it, the fact of, plugging in 10 minutes and I'd get half a charge.
Right.
It's, I think that changed my habits slightly, and I've had to kind of
What,
run
like the
back a bit and go,
insanely fast charging from like OnePlus or something?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean that was brilliant, especially when traveling. Having said that, this has got really good battery life, so it's not really as much of an issue anyway.
No, I was
I
going to
did it.
ask you about that because I do connect to my charger a lot, especially like when I'm using Dex, and I know you're going to talk about that in just a second. But I wanted to mention it for this. It seems like my battery drains kind of quickly.
Okay, interesting. I have been, as I said, pleasantly surprised with the battery life. It's I very rarely get anywhere near battery warnings. I might get to the 15% by the end of the day. And normally this phone, I mean, I take the phone off the charger when it is the mid, when it's got to 100. And if that means that's in the middle of the night, like if I get up, like as men of a certain age have to get up, I'll take it off the charger then. I won't just leave it on till the morning.
Well,
And so sometimes I've therefore had 24 hours, 36 hours between charges,
mm,
full charges. Um, I do notice that it does kind of, once it gets less than 10, it's not linear. It kind of crashes very quickly after that. That bit I did notice.
well, you can
Um,
tweak a couple of settings to prevent, or to make it at least go down to like 85% before it starts charging back up. But
yeah.
what I do in order to like save the USB-C port as much as possible, granted I'm still using it for Dex, but at night I have a wireless charger, a 15-watt wireless charger, so it'll do fast wireless charging.
Okay. So the the thing I'd ask is, do you have bad cell reception?
No.
Because that is the one thing in the past that I've found will destroy your battery. When it's always searching for a cell signal. And I've had phones that heat up. I can feel them heating up in my pocket as they're searching around.
Yeah.
Which used to be a big issue when hospitals didn't have Wi-Fi. Now that hospitals have Wi-Fi in the UK over the last 7, 8 years. But before that, when they didn't, My phones would drain really quickly inside the hospital because it's never got good reception and it's always searching. Um, any rogue apps you can think of? I mean, I've got a
Well,
ridiculous number of apps on this.
I am running a couple of different things that might be causing it in the background, like Nextcloud specifically, because I am
Mm,
backing up a lot of things like quite often with Nextcloud, and I could switch back to say, what BT Sync, Resilio Sync,
mm.
and that'll just run when I tell it to. But Resilio Sync then doesn't sync up with my Joplin, and Nextcloud is where I'm at for right now. So
Okay. So,
I'm gonna start keeping a closer eye on what is using up my battery,
mhm.
and
Maybe that's what it is.
yeah,
Maybe that's what it is.
yeah.
So yeah. Um, I mean, so I think as overall as a package, it's really good. I suppose so. When you're spending that much amount of money, you bloody, bloody well should be. If you're spending, laptop money for a phone. Um, but yeah, as I said, it slightly surprised me because I wasn't. I was kind of half thinking, oh, I messed up by buying such an expensive phone. But this is one that I think I can keep for a significant amount of time now. Actually.
Yeah, especially since it's
Anyway,
getting that whole 7 years of updates.
yeah, I do think that I'm not getting using it to its full potential. Especially Dex because I like Dex, but I'm just not using it as much. And so I was thinking of integrating that into my workflow a bit more as well. Now, I had thought about getting a Next dock and then connecting it up to that, but I think I don't know if there's some issues around shipping or whatever because obviously they're based in the States and getting it to come over here and all that sort of stuff. So I think actually, if I actually there's a colleague of mine at work who's the chief IT officer actually at the trust. So as a management role, that's what he does, and he always has a portable monitor in his bag because that's why he connects up his Samsung phone to and Dex and does it that way. So maybe,
Same here.
and I did check them out. They're not that expensive, relatively speaking.
What, the next docks?
Yeah. No, I mean a portable monitor.
Yeah, I have a couple of
Yeah,
portable monitors that I really like.
yeah. I can probably get one for it. The only thing is, again, obviously, they need to have a keyboard as well, and then does it. So that was the reason why I thought next stock. But let me see if I can
Now,
get a decent deal. I'll have a look.
we were talking about repurposing and reusing things a
Hmm.
little while ago. Now, next stock, I think I think they're a great idea, but for what you're getting, I think you're kind of overpaying. But they
Hmm.
do make HDMI to USB adapters. So,
Yeah.
like, you can hook the HDMI output from your phone to the USB input on a regular laptop, and then
Yeah.
just like use VLC or whatever and make it full screen. And then, yeah, you'd still need to find a way to share the mouse and keyboard from the low powered computer. But yeah, you could make your own neck stock that way, I think.
I mean, there is a Windows app, Samsung Dex, so that when you
Right.
connect it up, it'll then open up a
But who
Windows.
wants
I
to run
basically a virtual.
Windows?
Well, exactly. That's the thing, isn't it? That's the thing. But then it's something I've already got, I suppose, isn't it? I just boot into the Windows partition, which I've got for emergencies, and then just go into that, I suppose.
Hmm.
Options. Speaking of phones, I had bought a Pixel 3a a couple of months ago to put Ubuntu Touch on it, and I've mentioned that before. But I think after having had multiple attempts of trying to get it on, almost bricking it twice, and then deciding that I'm giving up and I'm not going to do that, it's just been sat in my drawer. So I think I might give it to my mum because her 5-year-old cheapo Amazon phone, I think it's an Umidigi, which I bought for her in 2019, is painfully slow. And I do worry because that's on Android 10, I think. It might even be 9. Um, and I do worry about the security because it has had updates for years. But my mom, being an old Asian woman, why do I need another one? It is fine. It is working. What do I need it for? A phone for? It's like, well, for all the 1,000 WhatsApps you send me. Um, Now the Pixel 3a is technically end of life. Um, and it finished on Android 12. But there is a Lineage OS 21 ROM on it, which is based on Android 14, which I saw a video about, and I thought, let's try it out. And in contrast to the struggles and failures I had of getting Linux on it, I was able to get Lineage and Google Apps on it in about 20 minutes. So, I mean, it's pretty good, actually. It was pretty seamless. I've just got to convince my mum now to take it because I can just imagine it now. Why do I need more? But then she will then say, how much storage has it got? And I'll say 64. And she goes, well, I've already got one with 64. So what's the improvement? Okay. And then I'll be like, no, but mom, it's safer for you for the security. And it's like, but I don't use it for my banking. I'm like, okay. Oh, mothers. Anyway. Yeah. Anyway. It's the yearly Muslim month of fasting, Ramadan. This is actually normally a stressful time for me, not because I need the extra acts of worship or anything like that, but my own angst on whether I should fast or not. I'm diabetic, as I've mentioned here, and I've got a long list of medical problems for which I'm on a frightening amount of medication. I counted that I'm on 6 separate tablets in the morning and 5 in the evening, which is ridiculous. And I've had plenty of people telling me, look, don't even bother. Look, you've got medical issues. God will understand. And God will understand. I know that. But it doesn't stop me feeling guilty about it, especially when you see said mother in her 70s doing it, and, my kids and everybody else. And you start doubting yourself and you start thinking, people, we're often our worst enemies, aren't we? We're often too hard on ourselves about a lot of these things. So I actually did try on the first day, and I just about managed it. I did start going hypo about half an hour from the end, but I managed to ride it out till then. I've got to be honest, I've just not had the guts to try again. Yeah. I mean, as I said, I think I'm just being too hard on myself, but anyway. I have looked into, because of the fact that it's kind of the religious month going on, I've been checking out some kind of devotional music as well, which I've found, it's not exactly my usual heavy metal stuff, but I mean, it's quite nice and spiritual and all that. And I'm trying to learn some of it on guitar. I can share some tracks on our Discord if anybody's interested in listening to it, but or not. But yeah, that's that. I went to see Dune 2. Really enjoyed it. Tempted to go watch it again, actually. I've started the third Dune book, Dune Messiah, because I want to know how the story develops. Please don't give me any spoilers. I mean, I know
Here's
there's
a
a bit with
spoiler
Captain
for you.
America. Go on then.
You'll fall asleep about 3/4 of the way through.
All right. Okay. Well, let's see. I've just finished the Umbrella Academy season 3. Having said to myself I wasn't going to bother, I did actually get into this, and I quite like that kind of weird sense of humor that it's got, and I did quite like the performances. I mean, the story made very little sense, but I mean, it's just that kind of. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if it was actually written by Brits. Actually, it's got a very sardonic, British, ironic sense of humor. It's got a couple of British characters in it as well, and a couple of British actors as well. But it's just, yeah. Final season of that is coming out in the summer, so that'll be a good watch. I know that the Three Body Problem is coming up on Netflix this week. I'm reading the book at the minute, so I'm not far into it. But I mean, so I'm just wondering whether to continue or just stop and just watch the TV series now.
Now, I really liked the book, and I haven't watched the TV series to make the comparison. But I thought the at least the first book was really good. I haven't read the other two, but I enjoyed reading it.
Because I remember when, probably about this time last year, maybe 18 months ago, I started reading The Sandman. And actually, I started hearing it. Actually, it was an audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got through about half of it. And then, for whatever reason, I didn't finish it off. And then it came up on Netflix. And so I thought, okay, I'm not going to bother restarting. I'm just going to continue watching it on Netflix. And I did find it did spoil the first couple of episodes for me because I knew what was going to happen and stuff, and didn't have the same jeopardy. And I don't know. It's been a while since I've watched a TV program that I already read the book for. I mean, it has happened in the past. It's just not recently. So I don't.
Well, I kind of felt
Anyway.
like Sandman was missing the Netflix version was missing some of the emotion that you really found
Yeah.
in the book version. So
Mm, true. True. But it was still good. I still enjoyed it.
yeah,
I still enjoyed it. Yeah. Anyway, as I said, work has been quieter this week because I've had a glut of meeting and teaching sessions, and even this coming up week, I'm going to be doing a pediatric life support course, which hopefully won't be death by PowerPoint, but you never
it
know.
will be.
Yeah.
I doubt you're going to be
And
practicing on kids. So
okay, so interestingly, on Friday we had simulation testing training for our junior doctors, and a cardiac arrest happened in the theaters, which is what we were planning. I mean, we had our own kind of model and all this kind of stuff to do it
awesome.
on. And then, like in the next door theater, they had a unexpected cardiac arrest. You know, something completely out of the blue, probably a massive allergic reaction or whatever. And it was like, okay, well, you know, this scenario we were going to do, but we're doing it in reality now.
Who wants
The
to take
patient's
their
fine as
turn?
well. The patient's fine as well, which is, I think it was just very shocking for
Now
everybody.
take your time.
It's not like she's dead. Okay. Speaking of work, I did have an interesting situation when I was working with a nurse this week who, for reasons I don't exactly know, opened up to me about some struggles she was facing. I'm not going to go into detail because I'm sure she doesn't want me to start talking about her business in front of the millions of people who are watching. But what it made me realize is that you should never judge a book by its cover, and you know, leave any preconceived ideas you have about people, which we all do when we see someone and work with someone. You have an idea of what kind of person they are, what kind of culture they come from, or whatever. And yeah, it was a bit of a kind of reminder to me just to be kind. Hashtag be kind. Okay, so that's my wanderings done. On to the innards.
Okay, for this innards, we're going to talk about different scams that have impacted me and family members and possible way to protect friends and family. Um, this first one, I don't know if it necessarily fits all the criteria, but it did stick with me. This was about a decade or so ago, maybe a little bit longer. And I think a lot of protections are in place for it now, but my mother in law got caught in a crypto locker scam and asked me if I could fix her computer for her. She'd been trying out some different genealogy slash family history websites, and I guess one of them was less than reputable, and her whole system got encrypted. The whole pop up at boot about who to send Bitcoin to get the key, etc., etc. And while I did my research, and from what I could tell, the choices were pay and take the chance that they would give you the key, which seemed unlikely, or reformat, lose everything. I mean, I was working at Hewlett Packard at the time, and I asked some of my coworkers that had a lot more experience in security than me, and they said the exact same thing. It's either, take a chance and pay or just write it off because there's nothing you can do. And now, this is where things got a little odd. I guess me and my coworkers couldn't know what the heck we were talking about because the in laws decided that the best thing to do was buy a third party application that was supposed to decrypt everything magically. Now, despite my warnings that it would not work, and from what I remember, it wasn't really a cheap application either. Needless to say, it didn't work, and they never mentioned it to me again. Now, I don't know how I could have prevented that second part, but as to the first, I would say to tell people not to install things from sketchy websites or don't run Windows. But most viruses and things like that are written for Windows because that's what most people use. Now,
I think the sorry to interrupt, but
go
I
ahead.
think it's important. There is a particular psychology that people go through when they are scammed, and it makes people do things that they wouldn't normally do. And scammers know this, and that's what they
Right.
play on.
They try to get that emotional attachment from you.
Yeah. So for example, in this scenario, you've got someone who's saying that, okay, all your stuff's encrypted, you have to give us this money or we're gonna whatever. And then somebody else comes up and says, yeah, pay 30 quid and or whatever, we'll unsort it out for you. And when you're in that kind of situation, your rational mind kind of disappears, and you're just kind of so worried about the thing that you think you've lost that, well, what's a bit of money, no big deal. But you've given the money and they've just ran off with it,
Yeah.
and you've still got you still got an encrypted hard drive.
Yeah, and
Um,
I guess the best thing you could say here is, backup. If she'd have had a backup, then, reformatting wouldn't have been that big of a deal.
yeah,
But convincing people that they need to do backups, it's like convincing people they need to visit the dentist.
I mean, I think the one thing that is slightly better about that now is that because so much of our stuff is in the cloud, if something happens to your physical machine, it's less. I'm not saying it's not impactful. It still is impactful, but it's you can still get your data from, because people have got it on multiple devices and accessing it from their iPad and their iPhone and their Android or whatever. So I think this is a one which is very much of its time. I don't know if this would work as well nowadays.
Well, you don't hear
But
as much about crypto scams impacting desktop users. You do occasionally hear about it hitting big businesses, but I guess that doesn't mean it doesn't impact desktop users, but still.
mm,
I don't think it's as much of a problem as it used to be. But the whole selling them sketchy fix-it software kind of annoyed me.
mm. Yeah, and again, yeah, I think the important thing is don't be very careful what you download, I suppose, as
And
you said,
keep
as you rightly
backups.
say, and yeah, and keep backups.
Okay, now a little bit closer in time, about 5 years ago, the same person got caught up in a TeamViewer scam. Now, the normal cold call, your Windows computer is having a problem updating, this is Microsoft support. They sent her a link to a page and had her download TeamViewer and share her screen. Then they had her log into her bank and blanked out her screen and wiped out her account. Now, I've had those guys.
Bastards.
Yeah. No, it's horrible. You should watch some YouTube videos on how they do this stuff. Now, or watching the scammers get scammed. That's always fun. Now, I've had those guys call me before, and I always greatly enjoyed trolling them and keeping them on the phone as long as possible, asking, at what IP address is the device that won't update? Or, wait, there's a Windows machine on my network? Where?
This reminds me of a friend of mine. Whenever you get cold calls from like car insurance companies saying, we want to talk to you about the accident that you had last week and this your personal injury claim, and he kind of went, yeah, but I didn't mean to kill the guy.
Oh, that's horrible. I love it. No, I had one of those guys like on the phone for like 20, 30 minutes one time, just giving them the runaround on about a Windows machine, and they want you to use command line tools to pull their own personal version of TeamViewer, et cetera, and then get it installed. But eventually I just broke down laughing and said, do people really fall for this crap? And their only answer was yes. And then they kept trying to keep going.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was bad. But now this one's a little bit easier to warn people about, even if it's a little bit harder to get them to listen. Here's the thing. Microsoft will never call you. I mean, you're not paying for support. They already got their money out of you, and they don't care if your device is able to update or not. The most they would tell you to do if you called them is reformat. That's what they would tell you to do. Now, I don't want anybody to start thinking that they're immune to this type of thing. Anyone can get hit by this type of thing, and the only recourse is to be educated and be paranoid.
Yes, paranoia is probably the important thing. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you.
Right.
It's actually so I had a situation once where I got a phone call from my bank, and it actually came up on my phone as my bank's number as well.
We're coming to that next.
And yeah, and then when I rang them back, It was oh yeah, we're trying to transfer 9 grand into your account, and it's been flagged up as a some kind of
Potential.
snag. Yeah. So okay. So can you send
Give us all your information.
or give us the initiation fee for the transfer, and then blah blah blah, and it's people do get you know stung by this kind of shit, man. I'm not gonna lie, I've been scammed as well in the time in the past, and
Oh
I
yeah.
like to think I'm a techie. But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that being said, my stepmother almost got caught by some cold callers that were supposedly from her bank. They had her all worried about some unusual activity and had her start logging into her bank or giving them information on her accounts so that they could access it. Thankfully, her bank saw the suspicious activity and put a stop to it rather quickly, and nothing got taken. Now, this is another one of those things that's hard to protect against without a wee bit of paranoia. Now, I would say that your bank will never call you, but I have had my bank call me about some things. Calling to tell me that my card was being used in California to buy a lot of gas is one thing. They don't need to verify who I am to do that. But I have also had some legit calls about some other things, and then they start the process of trying to identify me. Now, because I am paranoid, my response was, I'm not going to give you that information. I'm going to call my bank and go through the channels there to find out what I need to. And like I said, that one was legit, but the only protection from the ones that aren't is to go through the process of contacting your providers yourself instead of trusting an incoming phone call. Now, the guy that I was talking to at the time completely understood and gave me what information I would need to follow up with from the bank to, get where I needed to be. Now, granted, I absolutely did not use the phone number that he gave me, but the other stuff was useful, some account information, et cetera, et cetera. So, I call the bank on the numbers from the bank's website, and then I went through the whole process with them to get everything cleared up.
So I've had this as well when my bank has rang me and asked me. I still remember the funniest one was it was like midnight or something, or 1 o'clock in the morning, and I got a phone call saying, "Have you just b- uh, bought gasoline in Washington State?" And I'm like, "I live in the
No.
northeast of England, and you've just woken me up. Okay, fine, we're gonna block your card." So it's like, okay, that's great. So I have had a couple of calls like that, and again, I have. If I'm not sure, let's go. We just need to do some verification. I go, I'm not telling you anything. I don't know who you are. You could be fake as far as I know. And most of the time, they're actually like, yeah, that's a good thing. Okay, this is this. Ring this number, or not ring this number, but ring, and then ask
Right.
for this section, this, that, and then we can talk about it. And that's when I had the one about, we need to transfer you some money, but we haven't been able to transfer you. I was like, okay, fine, I'll ring my bank properly. And then they were like, we've got no record of this at all. So,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I knew, but to be. The only problem is, unfortunately, I don't know what it's like in America, but here, you spend your entire life on hold. I
Yeah.
also spent 45 minutes on hold just because of that. But
Yeah.
it's
Well,
important to do that sort of stuff.
um, I can't remember. I don't think it was Alibaba. I think it was before Alibaba. But there were a couple of Chinese websites back in the day where you could go and buy like really low cost stuff. So it was the same idea as those sites.
AliExpress.
AliExpress. I think it was either really early in the days of AliExpress or like there was another one before it. But I'd buy something there, and then like the couple of times that I bought something there, and I legitimately got items from them. For some reason, I would suddenly also get um, I suddenly donated like $1,500 to a charity, or I suddenly purchased an iPhone that I didn't know about, and these were coming up on my bank statements. So my bank called me. These are unusual transactions. What's going on here? Yeah. And then I would call them back, and yeah, I didn't do those. Those aren't me. Reverse those charges. So yeah, it happens. You go to sketchy websites to buy something, and next thing you know, you're donating to leukemia.
Mm.
Now, Similar things go for like emails. I never trust a link in an email. That's also what you should tell people around you if you want them to be safe. Anyone could have sent that email, even if a link looks legit, even if an email looks legit. I mean, from the time I was a teenager, that's one of the first things I learned how to do was to make it look like an email came from a person that had never logged into a system before. And there's always things like, your URL shorteners or redirects or
Oh yeah, I've had plenty of these phishing, messages, and um, what it gets you on is if you are actually, so like your Amazon delivery was delayed. Click here to, and it's like, actually, I am waiting for an Amazon delivery. So is this real? Is
isn't
this not
everybody
real?
always waiting for an Amazon delivery?
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Most of the time, most of the time they put it in my trash bin, um, which is really annoying. Anyway, but and there's plenty of times that my wife will come up to me and she'll go, "I got this message from Royal Mail." I'm like, "Okay, that's not from Royal Mail.
Yeah.
From
Or
DPD? No, that's not from DPD."
or you're logged into Facebook and you get a message from someone that you know on Facebook, and then you click the link to watch whatever video they sent you, and there pops up, you need to log back into Facebook. Guess what? That's
Yeah,
fake. Don't do that.
yeah,
It's giving away your
yeah,
password.
yeah. So I suppose the one thing interestingly is that do people don't email as much as they used to as a method of communication. You get what you get normally are things like when you've ordered something and things like that. And I think that's what they're kind of betting on, that you get, you see something, you think it's real, and then you get sucked in.
Text message, IM, Twitter, things like that.
Yeah. WhatsApp. I've got a story about WhatsApp, but I'll let you get through
No,
your
go
next
ahead.
one first.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
Now, another story, one of my kids got one of those text messages saying, your order is on the way. It costs this amount. Please call this number if this is incorrect. Now, she did text me and ask about it, and that was over like the RC chat that Google's RCS chat or whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah.
And so my response was, it's a scam, ignore it. I just typed it out real quick and then, hit send and put my phone down. But my message did not go through. And she called them because she was worried that she was going to get charged for this iPhone. And they told her that she bought an iPhone and that she was going to be charged, the atrocious amount of money for it. And they had her on the phone for a while, evidently trying out different things. And trying to get information about her accounts out of her or whatever. And what finally got her was they eventually asked her to go to Walmart and purchase some gift cards to correct the problem so that she could send them the gift card information. That's when she hung up and figured out that it was a complete and total scam. But I am happy that she kept them busy for a while instead of scamming somebody else. And I made sure to ask her what information she had given, and it turned out to be very little. But for her own peace of mind, she changed all of her passwords to all of her banking stuff just in case. And yeah, I mean,
So as I was saying, WhatsApp, right? I recently, I ended up joining a WhatsApp group. Remember I said I joined this kind of Sufi lodge thing a couple of months ago. Anyway, so they've got a communal WhatsApp group because everybody's got a WhatsApp group,
right.
And so I'm on it, and then I get a phone call, right? And the phone call is, "Hi, this is so and so from the WhatsApp group. We are going to have a Zoom meeting later today to discuss the way that the organization is going forward. I'm just going to send you the Zoom invitation code. Would you like to join?" And I was like, "Okay." And instead of getting a Zoom code, I got verify this is your device number that come up. Yeah. And he was asking for that. So I switched it off because I realized that, the guy's trying to get hold of get into my WhatsApps. Anyway, he obviously tried for a lot other people on that WhatsApp group, and some people did kind of go, "Oh, the number is 21281 this, what, and the other." So he then now had access to their WhatsApp, right? Because now on his device, the original device, because you can't be logged in two places, so the other one goes off. He's now got it, and then he started then WhatsApping other people, saying as if he's that person,
Right.
as if he's Imran or Ahmed or whatever, saying, "Look, bro, I've got some money problems. Do you reckon you could lend me 50 quid? Do you reckon you can lend me £100?" And people were like, "Oh, okay, shit, yeah, the guy," because they knew, because
Right.
I
Right.
was
You
new
know
to
them.
it, but
You know
everybody
them.
else knew, yeah, because it's coming from where you think it's coming from somebody you know.
Right.
And I mean, at one point I did think to myself, that's a clever way of doing it as well. And then again, I thought, what a shower of bastards. as
Actually,
well.
I do mention that type of scam.
Oh, do you? All right.
Yeah. But yeah, it does come up.
Yeah, yeah. Because I saw that the next thing you talk about is people try and start up a conversation with you and stuff like this. So, I mean, this is kind of what this guy was doing, because he was then pretending to be whichever number that he'd got, and was then spinning a story that something had happened. Because there were a couple of the guys on the group who did get taken in by it and did tell him the number,
Right. Right.
and then found out, and then they couldn't get back into their WhatsApps because
He
the
changed the
registered
password.
device was. Yeah, exactly, yeah. So
Now, I also saw a recent video from last week tonight that covered a scam called pig butchering. It's a very good episode if you get a chance to watch it. But it boils down to is someone will accidentally text message you asking if so and so is there, or are we still going out whenever, not knowing anything about you. Now, I've seen several messages like this recently, and it's just weird that I guess they put it on blast or something and out there to everyone. And then they'll have a conversation with you, a long-term conversation with you, and try and get you emotionally invested in them. And then they're going to try to convince you that they've had a emergency come up or whatever, and they're your friend, and they need a little bit of money. And then you send them a small bit of money, and then a bit more and more until they can't get any more out of you. It's a much longer scam, but evidently it works enough to be profitable. Because yeah, you send it to everyone, and 10% respond, and then like 10% of those actually provides you a profit eventually. But yeah, now I guess the best way to avoid this one is to ignore the texts from people that you don't know, or engage if you want, but never send money. Now, this one is harder to protect your family and friends against because it plays on people's kindness and loneliness. About all you can do is inform them and let them make their own decisions. Maybe that little bit of engagement is worth the money to them, but hopefully it isn't their life savings. But call your battle buddies, people. Now, there are some other things that you need to talk to your loved ones about. There are a lot of things that a kid can get caught up in that can cause devastating issues in their life. There's very little that you can do to protect people from online bullying, but you can let your kids know that there's a difference between the real world and the online world. That might not make those things better, but bullying has always happened, and at least with online bullying, there is evidence and actions can be taken if it gets bad enough. The laws are not always there yet, but they are getting there. And that's one of the major differences in bullying from when we were kids, is the
yeah,
fact that there's almost always evidence now.
yeah. I mean, there is my son. Unfortunately, he had a bit of this when he was younger, and I think the thing about education, I think, is very important. The idea of well, firstly, when do you get your kids smartphones and stuff? That's one point. Secondly, how locked down and how open it is, and then the general education of this is what you should talk about, this is what you shouldn't talk about, and if someone is bullying you verbally, that means they can also do it to you in a text format and things like that as well. And it's interesting. The next thing that you talk about is about pictures. That's another thing. Never take any
Yeah,
photos
this is
of
exactly
yourself.
what I'm coming to here.
Yeah,
This is a conversation everyone should have with their kids. Boy,
mm,
girl, it doesn't matter. Especially if they're underage. Um, don't let them, or tell them not to take nude photos of themselves. Now, they may think that they're sending pictures to someone that they love and that loves them, but things can happen. Bad breakups
Yeah.
are a thing, and people being jerks and showing off pictures is also a thing. I mean, even if there's nothing, malicious there, someone could borrow the phone and send themselves a picture. A picture could accidentally get shared in a group chat as a part of a bulk upload. Anything can happen. And once those pictures are out there, you can't really ever get rid of them. They're going to keep popping up forever. If it's on the internet, it don't go away.
Yeah, I mean, there was famously in India quite early on, actually. I'm talking about 2007,
Mm.
right? There was what was called an MMS scandal. So MMS had become a thing, and boys being boys
Right.
would film themselves,
Right.
right, when they were with their girlfriends or whatever.
Mm.
And there was a case of a girl who committed suicide at a big prestigious school in Delhi because her boyfriend had filmed them and then sent it to his mates. Just a 10-minute video
Right.
clip. Sorry, not 10 minute, 10-second video clip, right? But it was enough for it then to go all the way around the school. The school was then like, oh my God, we've got this happening in, this, that, and the other. And then she ended up getting expelled, and then she ended up getting, committing suicide.
Yeah.
And as I said, this was quite early on. This is
Right.
before WhatsApp and all that sort of thing.
That's when the video quality would have been hardly recognizable as far.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, so and you make a point that the adults know the risks. I'm not sure everybody does. People still do stupid things. People still take photos and all that sort and videos and share
They come
them
back to haunt you. I mean,
and they do. Yeah,
it's
and
happened
yeah,
in politics recently with one politician that had some explicit videos that were completely consensual with her husband that came out, and it wasn't supposed to be recorded but did get recorded. And yeah.
yeah. I mean, as Shakespeare said, the written word endures. And it's a bit like that, that when there's physical evidence of something, it will be there and it will never ever be gone.
Right. And
So be very careful.
one of the other problems with this, when your kid is underage and they take these kind of pictures of themselves, then they're creating and holding on to illegal materials. They can be charged for it. That on top of the trauma that they're already going through from the pictures being out there, I mean, it's insane to me. But you can look up YouTube videos on it of people, being told that since their kid is complaining that they accidentally, got catfished by some guy, some 40-year-old guy living in his mother's basement, and sent illicit pictures to them, that they could be charged. And that's just,
I mean, I think
it's horrible.
thank God. I mean, I think that thankfully in the UK we've not had that as a problem. It seems that the authorities here have been a bit more sensitive to that relatives. But what it can do is it can then put some emphasis onto the parents, because yes, it could be that 15-year-old girl thinks she's fallen in love with a guy and has therefore started sending him nudes. That's possible. But the authorities have to take into account, well, what if, is this because of child neglect? Have the parents been, adequately looking after the children? How did this situation occur?
Right.
And there have been cases, unfortunately, what they call grooming cases in the UK, where, gangs of men will prey on 14, 15-year-old girls who come from kind of chaotic homes, and things like that. And so if you are then the parent of somebody like where this has happened to, you've now got social services breathing down your neck, making sure that you aren't actually a neglectful or abusive parent yourself.
Right.
So the whole thing is FUBAR, as they say.
Essentially, yeah. Tell them don't take those pics.
Yeah. So yeah, just don't take photos.
Now,
Just don't take photos.
I also want to say that some things in this regards are changing. I mean, they're getting scarier, and at the same time, in some ways, less so. Now, with the advent of like AI generated images, fakes can be made, and there's nothing you can really do to stop it. It is something that we're going to have to live with and get used to. Yeah, it does suck when people make those images and claim it's you and harass you for it. But at least, you know, you can look at those images now and look back at them and say, you fell for an AI generated image, you idiot. That isn't me. And maybe that works. Maybe it doesn't. I mean, you're still probably going to get harassed for it, but at least it's something now.
Yeah, I mean that is a bit. Yeah, AI is going to be scary, isn't it?
Oh, it already is. I mean, especially like this year with all the politicking going on, and there's already been a couple of scandals with cold calls and AI generated voice.
Yeah, I mean there was an AI generated video clip of the Labour leader saying something objectionable that was going around, and the point about it was not that it was objectionable in the sense of like swearing or anything like that. It was a false policy statement, so it looked real. It's like, this is what Keir Starmer thinks about X. You know, he thinks, you know, people should be taxed at 90% or something. You know, and people fell for it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's an election. It's an election year for us. Hopefully, I really hope so. The Tories have got till January 2025. If we have to limp till January 2025, be nothing left of this country, I tell you.
Yeah. Well, we have an election this year, and either things are go well or I'm moving in with you.
Actually, the place to go is Ireland.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is St. Paddy's Day today, so.
Yeah. Well, hey.
Now, I did look up an article about, you know, various Facebook marketplace scams, and I think they can really apply to a lot of online stuff. I think we've kind of hit up on it a little bit already. And
See, so it seems like Facebook Marketplace, when it comes to scams on Facebook Marketplace, we're still in the relatively early stages. So a lot of the things that used to happen on things like eBay and Amazon, which have now been kind of regulated out, right, are happening still on Facebook Marketplace because it's so new.
You get to see the old scams come back anew, especially like the Craigslist scams and things like that. So I don't know if you have Craigslist over there. Do you?
I think we might do, but to be honest, it was never a big thing. We've got Gumtree. But yeah, Facebook Marketplace. I mean, because I have experience of when Facebook Marketplace came out first, and then you know how well it worked, and then now it's just you can't buy anything or sell anything on there because it's just unusable because of the scams. You just have to switch it off.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, mostly what this article said was that you really need to do the final exchange of money and item in person after you have inspected the item, of course. Now, I have done a couple of shipping ones for smaller items from Facebook, and that has worked out, but I understand it is, you know, getting harder to keep things working or keep finding things that aren't scams there. And now, if you're a seller, don't send the item you are selling before you get the money. And then one of the first things, you know, that you got to keep an eye on is if a price is too good to be true, it's probably a scam. It probably is. So yeah. Now
I mean that's true of life in general. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah. Now I have seen several items on Facebook Marketplace for like really good prices, but then when you contact the seller, they send you a link to a website where you can buy the item and have it shipped to you. And it's from some, you know, auction or sale website that I've never freaking heard of before. And yeah, I'm not going to trust that. Not in the least. Now,
or you get a thing saying, I'm happy to, get someone to come pick it up, but I need to pay the courier to do that. So can you send me 100 quid on a FedEx thing, and then I'll send the courier. That'll be the fee, and you'll be just like, yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah. Now, if you're buying a working piece of electronics, you really need to verify that it works as expected before paying for it. Power it up and make sure that it fully boots or whatever it is supposed to do. Now, like this part of the article that I got this from was a little different for me because I buy broken electronics. I buy things that, normally, if, especially from like Facebook Marketplace, I'm buying things that other people have given up on so that I can try and fix them in a lot of cases.
Mhm.
But yeah, if you're expecting it to work, make sure it works the way you think. Now, another classic one is you're buying something and someone sends you an overpayment. Now, usually in the form of a check, and then asks you to send the extra back. But who uses checks? But then a couple of days afterwards, the check bounces and you're out the item, the money, and the return check fee from the bank. Now, first of all, when someone tries this, ask them, what the heck are you still doing with checks? Second,
Exactly. I was going to say, who the hell uses a check anymore?
second, tell them you need to wait for the check to clear before I send you anything. Now, I guess there's other ways to do this.
So I would say I would generally say use some kind of third party thing, so such as eBay, PayPal, something like that.
Right.
And having said that, I got scammed about 5, 6 years ago when I was trying to sell a Note 9, and I managed to sell it on eBay, and the money came through, and it had come through via PayPal, and I was like, okay, great. So then the guy contacted me saying, instead of posting it, do you mind if I come and pick it up from the house? And I was like, okay, if you want to, no big deal, right? Because I just live in the same town, which he did. Anyway, so he turns up, and I say, well, here's the phone, here's all the stuff. And he's like, oh yeah, thanks mate. And he goes, and I'm like, okay, that's that done. And then 2 days later, I get a thing saying that, this is an unrecognized transaction, and the
Right.
PayPal have stopped it because the buyer has said that they never bought this, right? So then I contacted PayPal, and PayPal said, okay, that's fine. Yeah, people do this kind of stuff. Just give us the details of the
Postage,
shipping.
yeah.
And I went, I haven't got details of postage because the guy came and picked it up. And he went, okay, there's nothing we can do then.
Yeah.
Because the person who's bought it is saying that they never bought it. This is an unrecognized transaction, that this is a scam on their side. There's not, and if you'd posted it, at least you would have been refunded the money as a kind of,
Right.
as part of the PayPal, EULA, as it were.
We need to verify that you actually sent him something. So
Yeah. Which I can understand. And then I said, and then they said, so how did he come pick it up? I said, well, he came to my front house and said, well, have you not got a camera? And I was like, well, actually, I was living in a rented property, but the guy next door did, right? So I went round to him and I said, let's have a look at the Amazon camera or Ring, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy had parked just out of reach of the camera. And when he'd walked in, instead of just walking onto my drive, he'd walked into next door's drive further up and then jumped over the fence.
Oh God.
So you couldn't see him. You just saw a guy in a black t-shirt and black trousers.
So he's been doing
Obviously,
this for a while.
And then I actually mentioned it to one of my friends. And he went, "Oh, did you not know that scam?" I went, "What?" "Oh, this is a classic one." And I was like, "Oh, well, it wasn't classic for me."
Well, his address should have been posted on his eBay if you were supposed to send him things.
Yes, but you see, that person was a different name as well. Because it was like, I bought it with my girl. Not that he bought it with his girlfriend's account, but
you still know what address to go to and whose door to knock on.
yeah. And then you think to yourself, is that really a good idea?
Yeah, because they'll just call the cops on you.
Yeah.
You'd be trespassed. But yeah, no, it's that is one way that can happen. Another is whatever method they use to pay you, they overpay, and then you send them the difference, and then they reverse the charges, and yeah, you're out the money. But yeah,
So your next point, I think, is
is the one you had kind of hit up on
yeah.
a little bit ago. Now, sometimes you're contacting someone over IM for Facebook messages or Facebook Messenger, and then they ask you to switch over to like texting, and they need you to prove that you are real, that you're not a scammer, and to send them the codes that they send to your phone or whatever. Now, this is usually some type of 2FA scam, like Majid was talking about a little while ago, and it's used to get access to one of your accounts. Now, you're verifying that you are you, but it's probably getting them access to something of yours. So it's allowing them to verify that they are you. Or also, what they could be doing is setting up a Google Voice account. And I hadn't necessarily thought about this one, but they could set up a Google Voice account and then run further scams on other people, but on a phone number that is now attached to your accounts and your phone. So technically, the blowback could come to you, and then you'd have to prove that you're not the scammer.
So I suppose in this sense we're lucky because we don't have Google Voice in this country.
Oh, I love my Google Voice number, but yeah. Do
Yeah.
you have any other services that provide a number like that, a free online number that?
Not really,
Hmm,
to be honest. Not really. Because people use WhatsApp for calls as well,
right, right.
so you don't
Or
kind of need it
Telegram.
as much. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, or Telegram. The interesting thing about this is that I've been getting quite a few emails recently saying this is your Microsoft single-use access code.
Mm.
Like, I didn't request this.
A good thing it came to
Somebody else
me
has
and
to do it.
not go to someone else.
Yeah. And then I did go on my Microsoft account and found that somebody has been trying to access my Microsoft account 20 times in the
Mm-hmm.
last
Mm-hmm.
day from China. Now the question from now obviously they're not actually getting the number, and so they're not being able to actually do the 2FA scam because I'm getting the email or I'm getting the text message. But the question for me was, how do I stop them doing it? I can't stop them keep requesting it, can I?
Well, you
If
could
they've got
turn
my
off
email address.
2FA, and then that would stop you getting the emails
Yeah.
and just give them access.
So, yeah, just roll over, yeah.
Right? No, I had the same thing happen like several years ago. There was some there was a Steam link or Steam leak of account information, and
Hmm.
so like people were trying to access Steam accounts from China, and so they were just like blasting everybody's Steam account, and yeah, so I kept getting the verification codes to my phone because I had 2FA turned on, but not everybody did, and over again I get that 2FA. Here's your code. Here's your code. Here's your code, and so yeah, go in, change the password, and I was good to go. Moving on, like when you send an item to someone because they purchased it or whatever, always have a tracking number. This kind of covers your thing where they came and picked you
Yeah.
up in person. Always have a tracking number and preferably require a signature if it's a higher value item. That
Mm.
way you can verify receipt. Some people will try to say that they didn't receive the item in order to get their money back and keep your item, like, a
Yeah.
Note 9.
Yeah.
Now, that's just some of the things from the articles, but I think that they covered it pretty well. Now, some things to tell your loved ones, just to kind of partially sum this up. Never trust a phone call or a text message where they request information. They
Mm.
engaged, and then they want you to prove that you're you. Never trust an email with a link or one that seems panicked. There are other things you can look for, like malformed email addresses, misspellings, things like that. Never take a photo of yourself that you wouldn't want the whole world to see. And never send money to someone that you don't know without some type of verification first or some type of backup system to make sure that you're protected. Amazon's pretty good about it. Granted, there are still Amazon scams. eBay's pretty good about it. Granted, there are, of course, still eBay scams. But that little extra protection there is sometimes kind of worth it. Do you have anything you want to add there?
No, I think that's exactly the thing. Never trust a phone call or text message when they request information. If necessary, put the phone down and ring said person again. No, don't click anything in a link. Never take a photo of yourself. The way somebody put it to me was, never take a photo of yourself that you wouldn't want your mum to see. you know. But yeah, no, I think it's and as I said, it's hard not to get into these scams because people are so clever about it and the way they do it. And as I said, I
And it's an
like to think,
ever-changing field. I mean,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I like to think of myself as someone really clever and knows this tech, and I've been scammed out of enough crap in my life.
yeah,
You know,
yes, you're one clever person versus, the millions of scammers that are out there.
yeah. So
You figure
it's
one of
just
them's got to be clever as well.
Anyway, I think we will move on to vibrations from the ether.
Okay, we do have a couple of vibrations from the ether. One of them is short and one of them is like super duper long. Which would you prefer?
I'll go for the short one, shall I?
That's the first one.
So from Henrik Hemrin. Hi, I got this site recommended recently. I think it's very impressive and interesting. The page shows very many operating systems with their timelines and relations to each other. There are more interesting pages on the site. See the buttons on the top of the page. So, what this basically is I don't know if anybody else has seen it. There used to
What
be
this is you didn't listen to your own paranoia and you clicked that link, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. I trust Henrik.
Yeah. There used to be a picture that you used to be able to get, which is of all like a family tree of distros. And this is kind of that kind of thing.
Yes, it does show all the hierarchy of what distros are based off of what, and it's very similar, I think, to the ones that you can see on Wikipedia. I don't think it's exactly the same. I think this has a lot more, but if I remember right, they're even talking about how more is getting added to it because there are so many different flavors of Linux and just. Oh, yeah. The page says includes about 1,130 operating systems so far. And yeah, it does. It's really tiny writing. You'd have to zoom in really far to see anything, and you can scroll down this thing all day.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's actually slightly a bit out of date, actually, because it's last update till April 2023. But I mean, I remember seeing something similar to this when I first got into Linux and I was trying to kind of understand, and in that sense it was useful knowing that this is based off Debian, this is based off Fedora and stuff like that. And this is obviously a bigger, much more extensive one, and it's got loads of kind of OSs from the 80s and things like that. And yeah, it is very small.
But it's definitely not all inclusive.
Oh yeah, it's definitely not all inclusive, and it's interesting to see how there was such a plethora of things before and how it started to kind of slow down a little bit. But well, not slow down, decrease as time goes on, which I suppose is not surprising, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one's from you.
Okay, let's see. Gotta get back to the beginning here. This is from Mark. Hello, mintCast and crew. Caution, I do get a little long-winded, so if you're going to read a reply to any of this, please feel free to condense it as you need. And I will say, I cut out large chunks of this. I'd like to start off by saying that I love your podcast. I listen to it every time it comes out, as I have Rhythmbox set to get new episodes when they come out. No, I do have to state here that I am Canadian, and I find nothing wrong with the way that Majid pronounces his words. He has a fine example of a proper British accent, and it's not his fault that Americans have their own spin on the English language.
Here. I like this guy already.
Right? He just kissed. Oh wait, I'm gonna watch my language there. With that being said, I was listening to an episode or two ago where I believe he was asking for music examples. Now, I will admit that I was overly tired and had been enjoying a little bit of the MJ, which is legal in Canada. I thought he was asking for examples of good metal covers of songs. If that's the case, I have a couple YouTube video links below from an artist Leo Moriciello.
Yes,
Moriciello. Yeah, we've both
yeah.
talked about him before.
Yeah, and actually the ones that he's put as well, I've listened to. Like for example, he's put the Pet Shop Boys, It's a
Right.
Sin. That's
Yeah.
on my playlist at the minute.
Well, I'm a big fan of a lot of his stuff, but one of my favorites has to be Genie in a Bottle, which he collaborated with another artist on, whose name escapes me right this second. Now,
Feel Good Inc. was good as well.
yeah, yeah. Now he says he discovered him on YouTube and is really good and plays all his own instruments normally. And he says he does occasionally have guest singers or guest musicians, and he tours and have different people with him. And the name of his studio is Frog Leap Studio. And he says,
Studios.
yeah, yes,
That's how it always starts. Is that all his videos start with Leap Studios?
yeah. Now, in the video for Eye of the Tiger was the first one that I had seen from him, and he was the guy wearing the baseball cap, and realized just how much fun he was having doing these videos. So, this guy kept watching. So, yeah, that list is for you, Majid.
Okay, well,
And
to be honest, I've listened to quite a few of these already, and I do like the Eye of the Tiger one and Pet Shop Boys.
And I will say that Leo's goatee just blows mine out of the water. I mean,
Oh yes, yes. You are just a Padawan to his Jedi,
right?
On that front.
Now, he also suggests that you update your bio on the Mint Mint post
which
page.
I have actually.
Yeah, I remember the conversation where you sent that to Bill. Now, I've been a long-term listener since before Leo went to do other things, and I do remember the other gentleman who had an English accent. That would be Tony.
Yeah. Anybody heard from Tony?
He's still about, from what I hear. He hasn't been doing the distro hoppers, but I think he still talks to Moss on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
I see what you mean by this. He gets a bit long-winded.
Yeah, it keeps going and going. Now, I do have a question about Linux. I have looked on most of the message boards and the wikis. I haven't found a solution for it yet. I have two printers that are both HPs that are connected to my HP computer. The one is connected wirelessly to the router, and the other is connected via USB. The wireless one, a Photosmart 5510 series, for some strange reason, keeps being re-recognized at least 3 to 4 times a day. It's annoying, but I only use it for the scanner portion on it. I'm not asking for where to find the setting. I'm asking if there would be a way to disable the auto recognition of printers. The other one I have is an HP LaserJet 1020, and for some reason it is recognized by the computer, but it has stopped printing anything even though I have drivers installed, and I even have a program installed called Reactive HP Laser, which is supposed to fix any issues with the HP Laser, but doesn't seem to be doing anything. I'm a little bit at a loss as to what to do with getting it working again. I know that normally when I update my Linux Mint, it throws an issue for a while, and then magically I can get it to rework, or something causes it to work again. At the bottom of this email, I'm pasting the system information in case you may figure there might be something I'm doing with the system that would be causing my printer issues. I did not include that information in the email. That was a long list. Now,
I mean, printers and Linux have always been an issue.
yeah, but Cups has always been really good, and HP is usually pretty good about putting out their drivers and everything. So it's difficult to say. But the one that is disconnecting and reconnecting, I would... No, is that the one that's... Okay, I only use it for the... Okay. The wireless one. So that's wireless, and it's having this issue. That's a tough call. I wonder if you can, like... If it's got... an Ethernet port on it, and instead of hooking it up wirelessly, you can hook it up to the Ethernet and then see if it still has that same issue. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that could be a way of going around it. The thing is, it's not as easy as it used to be just actually physically connect something, a printer to the wires physically. But that could be a way of looking into it.
And I'm not going to be able to help you a whole lot with the LaserJet. I mean, it should just work. I don't know what the issue is. Now he says for the LaserJet he paid $13 at a thrift store and figured it was worth the risk. He's been using it for about 5 years now. And
I think you got your money's worth then. I think you got your money's worth.
He's only had to replace that toner cartridge once, and all he's doing is straight printing with it. So, like he's well worth the money he paid. Usually it gets gets a bit flaky when he does an upgrade to a newer version of Linux Mint, but he can normally get it to work. It's wired. It should just be working. I mean, seriously. I would say try an live disk of an older kernel, of an older version of Linux Mint, and see if the problem clears up. And then you'll know that it is an actual operating system issue as opposed to a printer issue.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just a case of you got your money's worth out of a cheap piece of kit. Maybe it's time to move on.
Maybe. Now he says he has a small question. We keep mentioning Ventoy, and from the sounds of it, it's like a virtual machine or virtual box, which is also what Docker is supposed to be similar to, I guess. If they are functionally roughly the same, then I will just stick with my virtual machine. I'm 56. I've been using computers since I was 15. That's a long time, and I don't see a need to put a new tires on an old car when the other ones still have tread. Now, okay, there's a little bit of an issue here. Ventoy is not like Docker. Ventoy is like a wrapper for ISO images so that you can put them on a USB stick and run a live CD. But it's a whole lot easier to add more images to it, so you can make a multi-boot with that and take images away. So you set up Ventoy once instead of completely re-imaging it with a new image every time.
Yeah.
And then you just
don't have to flash it again and again and again.
Right. You just copy the ISO and paste it onto your Ventoy stick, and it's ready to go. It works for Windows. Like you can put the Windows ISO on there, and you can put the whatever Linux ISO you want on there. So if you're trying to make a USB stick that does multi-boot, Ventoy is really great for that.
And especially if you're a distro hopper as well and you want to try out new things, it's much easier just to download and then just copy paste into a drive rather than having to reflash. Sometimes you might find that if you've got secure boot, it would ask for a hash key, and Ventoy have actually supplied that, and it's on the disk, so it'll be on your USB. So you just look for that.
And
there's a link to that.
With Windows 11, there's a way to get around those whole arbitrary hardware limitations that they put in using Ventoy. Yeah. I haven't done it.
But that's what it's there for. It's not a Docker thing or a VM. It's a way of being just an easier way of trying out new distros.
Yeah, and it works first time really easy for some people, and then some people just can't get it to work at all.
A lot of it depends on the ISO image, as I found out with KDE Neon. But when I re-downloaded it and put it, I was actually able to get it. When I did manage installing it, I did manage to put it on my Ventoy stick and did it from there. So it's sometimes just the ISO. But yeah, it's a good tool. I like it. I really do.
Okay, so now he says he wrote in a while back asking about any good voice dictation software, as he's about 70% blind, having had a mini stroke as well as having carpal tunnel in both wrists. He has trouble typing and using the computer, but he still manages, as we can tell. Using the web app's capability in Linux Mint, he set up his new voice dictation site, which is called SpeechTector, that he runs in the evil Chrome. Uses Firefox as his main browser. He says, I was previously using the website dictation.io until they closed down. And lol, I have to say I don't use Arch, have no interest. However, I used to use Mandrake originally, and when it disappeared, I went to Red Hat, which I hated, and then I found Linux Mint. I think it was version 17. But in between, I went back to Windows after each attempt to use a Linux distro, as I could not find any distro that actually allowed me to do all the things that I could do in my Windows. Now I tell people that if they want to try Linux Mint is the way to go. Thanks, Clem. I love the fact that Linux Mint now has live distros where you can boot up from it and sometimes fix mistakes that you've done to the OS. However, the Mate version does not have the magnify function, making it useless for somebody who is darn near blind. Both the XFCE and the Cinnamon have a magnify function from the get-go. If anybody is talking to Clem personally, they may wish to put this bug in his ear to either include the magnify function in the Mate version if they can, but I've thought of one other thing that would make Linux Mint awesome in my opinion. I am mental DOS user originally, and I love how the terminal you can use the up arrow to scroll through commands. I know this has been there since way back when. What I would love to see, if possible, is to have that capability added to the menu text box. There are days that I will constantly be loading one program and do not wish to clutter my desktop, nor my quick launch bars with an icon, just for one day having the ability to up arrow and get the last item that I am running again would be nice. That is all I have. Have yourself a great day, weekend, whatever. A fan and listener in Canada.
Well, thanks a lot, mate, for the really comprehensive feedback. It's probably made up for the last 3 months of hardly having anything. But yeah, I hope you get better soon from your medical issues. And allegedly, Clem does listen to this once in a while. So if he has listened, then hopefully he'll pick that up. I don't know. Accessibility is becoming a bigger thing nowadays.
Yeah.
So
I don't really know of any good dictation software that is like Linux specific. I mean, there's the stuff from Chrome. Google has the stuff. That's about all I can think.
Yeah, same here. I can't. Yeah, I can only think of mobile apps. I can't think of a specific one for.
But yeah, we love hearing from you. We don't care that it's long. It does not bother us. We enjoy it. Mark, if you want to give us more feedback and tell us how you really hate Majid's voice, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
What?
Doesn't matter. Anyway, so moving on to check this out. So in Check This Out, we've got two things, one courtesy of moi and one courtesy of Londoner, the Svengali, the Dr. No, the hand behind Linux Mint. So from me is a link to Scrippy, screen copy, whatever, that I mentioned earlier about, mirroring Android onto your Linux box. I put the link to the OMG Ubuntu article about it. So do check that out and see what you guys reckon. And from Londoner, Fast Fetch, which is like NeoFetch, but faster, hence the name. It's because it's written mostly in C, and it shows by default, without configuration, more information than NeoFetch would. And you can configure it either a .conf file or a .json file. It was originally released in March 2022, and it's up to date up to March 2nd of this year. There's a link to get it from GitHub in the show notes. It's available for multiple formats in Linux and can also be installed on Windows and Mac OS. But why the hell you would want to do that, I have no idea. And there's a nice little picture showing how great it is. On to housekeeping and announcements. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us an email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube for all the unedited goodness. Post at the mintcast subreddit. Chat with us directly on Telegram and Discord, or post directly at https://mintcast.org. Our next episode will be 2 p.m. US Central Time on Sunday, March 31st, 2024. And there's a link to get that converted to your time zone in the show notes. The next roundtable live stream will be 2 p.m. US Central Time on Saturday, March 23rd, 2024. And there's a link to get that converted into your time zone in the show notes. Next roundtable live stream will be 2 p.m. US Central Time on Saturday, April 6, 2024. And there's a link to get that into your time zone in the show notes. Livestream information is available on mintcast.org/livestream. Wrapping up. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, if you like the sound of my voice, you can catch me on the Linux Link Tech Show. That's tllts.org, or the Linux Lugcast, which is at linuxlugcast.com, or you can send me an email, jb@mintcast.org, or there's a link in the show notes to buy me a coffee with Kofi.
I actually listened to the Linux Lugcast the other day.
How'd you like it?
It was all right. Quite enjoyed it. Moss couldn't be with us today, but if you want to get in touch with him, well, he does Full Circle Weekly News. You can email him at bardmoss@pm.me, and he's on Mastodon at zyvela@hostux.social. Bill also couldn't be with us today, although the amount of times he's contributed, he might as well have been.
Right.
I bet you can get a hold of him at bill@mintcast.org, bill_H on Discord, at WCHauser3 at fossadon.org on Mastodon, and check out his other podcasts, Linux OTC and 3 Fat Truckers. You can get a hold of me by emailing me on drmajid@mintcast.org. I have a Twitter. I've only recently logged back into it. Whatever. Call it Twitter, call it X, call it the artist formerly known as Prince. I don't know. Yeah, if you really want to, at Atypical Doctor 870 on that. Although, don't be surprised if I don't reply. More likely, you'll be able to get me on Instagram and Threads and Atypical Doctor, and there's also the Atypical Doctor podcast on Spotify, and I'm also a co-host on Linux OTC. Eric of this parish unfortunately couldn't be with us today. He's recovering from some health things, and we wish him the best. You can hear and see him obviously on this, but also Distro Hoppers Digest and Linux OTC, as well as Linux Saloon and Linux Lugcast. You can also get in touch with him at his email, eric@mintcast.org, Discord, Eric_Adams, Telegram, there's a link in the show notes, Matrix, another link in the show notes, and Mastodon. And there's a link for that in the show notes.
Hey, where's that link?
Before we leave,
Where's that link?
the Fosterdon.
Oh, in the show notes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Before we leave, I want to make sure we acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Bill, probably, for our audio editing. Archive.org for hosting our audio files. Hubstar for our logo. Unedited for the animated Discord logo. Londoner for time syncs and many, 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 many other contributions. Can never overstate his importance to the project. Bill, again, for hosting the server, which runs our website maintenance, and the Nextcloud server on which we host our show notes and raw audio. And the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about.
Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Henko. I run Arch.
Do you? Didn't know about that. Alrighty then. You know, I worried to myself with it was just me and you. How are we gonna make this go on? We went on for 2 hours 40 minutes.
Right. I'm ending the stream now.
Yeah, man, definitely. Flipping heck.
I wasn't too worried about it. I was worried about it when I thought I was